How's it going, creeps? Welcome to episode 7 of Cinema Creep, a Black Mass Films podcast where we dissect all things vile, disgusting, and downright terrifying in the world of horror cinema. Of course, this episode is brought to you by none other than Everblack Coffee. Go to everblackcoffee.com and pick up a bag for yourself. It is amazing, premium quality, ethically sourced coffee with a macabre twist. So, of course, I am Justin James, and I'm joined by Andrew Henderson. How you doing today?
What's up, guys? I am doing great, Justin. Busy week this week, but all things considered, pretty good.
Yeah, we've our podcasting schedule has been crazy all over the place. We've missed the last couple weeks, but we are working on getting back on track. So tonight's episode, I am pretty excited about. I've been wanting to do an episode on these particular kinds of films since we've started this podcast, and it is time. So I guess, we'll talk a little bit about like stuff we've watched over the last couple weeks, and then we're really going to deep dive into some pretty good films. So what have you been watching while we've not been podcasting?
Oh man, I've been watching a ass ton of stuff.
Same. I think we've watched almost all the same stuff.
No, we did. We watched a couple of these main ones together. But a couple things I watched straight away was I watched this documentary, Justin, called At the Drive-In. It's a documentary on Amazon Prime, and it's about this drive-in theater from Philadelphia, I think it is. And it's called the Mahoning Drive-In, and it's essentially this older guy, and he's running this drive-in, and essentially, it's going the way of the times because, a drive-in isn't necessarily, it's a very niche type thing, right? Not everybody is into drive-ins anymore.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately. So basically the synopsis is this younger guy. He's probably, I don't know, early 20s, maybe he's in his 20s, I think, early 30s. He's driving home from work and he has to take a detour because of traffic. So he decides to get off on this back road and follow it. And he runs across this old drive-in. So he decides to stop in because, he likes films, likes, whatever, abandoned stuff. So he's like, I just want to check out this abandoned drive-in. He goes there and lo and behold, he finds that it's open, talks to the owner. And they essentially start pairing up, or they team up, and because the younger guy knows like the marketing side of social media and stuff like that, as to where the original owner didn't. And then they bring in a third guy that's the friend of the younger dude, and they help him get this drive-in back on its feet. And they basically take it from something that is dying to something that's thriving. And it's a super awesome documentary. It's heartfelt. It's just very inspirational, right? It's, if you grew up going to the drive-in and stuff like that, you're gonna love it. And it's just a good time. It's called At the Drive-In, and it's on Amazon Prime.
I'm gonna have to watch that because, I mean, it's almost, so drive-ins are obviously, to the point now. I mean, there's still, several all over the country, but it's not really something many people do anymore. And then I would say cinemas in general are kind of on that decline just because of streaming. I mean, like, sure, a lot of people still go to the theater. Well, I mean, not right now with the virus and all the lockdowns and stuff, but I just feel like way more people would rather stream things, which is really unfortunate because going and seeing a film in a cinema is just like, it's not just watching the movie. Like, it's part of the experience to me anyway. Like, I mean, I like the smell of movie theaters. Like, even if I'm not going to eat popcorn, like the smell of popcorn, sitting in the theater, the surround sound, the big screen, just that whole, and then like the group experience of watching a film with a bunch of other people. So,
well, let me tell you about the rad thing about this documentary, right? Like,
you tell me.
It follows like these real life individuals, right? But these people end up working for free at this drive-in, right? Just to help it, function. Because the whole thing is this was a 35 millimeter projection drive-in, and a lot of theaters today, or even drive-ins, they were converting over to digital. And digital projectors can cost upwards of $50,000 or more. This older gentleman couldn't really afford that, so that's why his drive-in was not only dying. One, it's being a drive-in. Two, he's not going the way of digital, so a lot of the newer films you're not getting your 35 millimeter prints of, so you're not able to show a lot of the newer movies. But these people that came on to help him revive this drive-in were working for absolutely no pay. One dude was driving 6.5 hours one way, Justin, to work at this drive-in, to just like work concessions or help out doing whatever. And a lot of these guys, since they were driving so far just to work at this drive-in, they would go there Thursday evening and they would stay until Sunday evening. So they would literally set up air mattresses and cots in the concession area overnight and sleep there just to help it function. It's pretty gnarly to see the passion behind these people. And like I said, it's super inspirational, super heartfelt. And if you like movies, which I hope you do because you're listening to our podcast
right
at the drive-in, it's super sick. I highly recommend it.
I mean, they might not like movies. They might just listen to us to make fun of us.
Because you have a nice voice.
Yeah, it's because I've got that podcast voice. But so that's going to definitely be on my list of things to watch over this next week. So we also watched, you watched that. I didn't watch that. So everything else we both checked out. So what about Scare Package on Shudder?
Scare Package was pretty awesome.
Yeah, so about 2 weeks ago, I put it out on Twitter. I said, what should I watch on Shudder? Because there were some new things. I think Bone Box was the other one, and then Scare Package. And Scare Package won, pretty handily. So I checked it out. So this is an anthology film. I really enjoy anthology films. Body Bags, Trick or Treat, Creep Show. So
Tales from the Crypt,
stuff like that. So this was very, it was almost like a comedy, but it wasn't. I don't like films, we've mentioned this on the show before, where it's like a comedy, but it's like a horror parody, like Scary Movie and stuff. I don't really care for those films at all.
Satirical films.
So like the first Scary Movie, I was okay, that's whatever. But then, they just went on. There's like 20 of those things now. But this Scare Package is more of like, it's a horror, but it's meta, and it's just extremely, it's like horror films making fun of themselves, like making fun of the genre. But it was just extremely over the top, extremely gory. And I actually thought the majority of it was funny. There were, let's see here. So Joe Bob Briggs is in this.
Pleasant surprise.
Yeah. So when he popped up, I was like, oh shit. But, so how many directors were there? There were 7 directors. The tagline is 7 directors, 7 tales of horror, 0 working cell phones. So I think my favorite shorts from this, I definitely like the first short, or not, and it wasn't the first one, but it was the one where they're in the woods. I think I see you wrote here in the notes too, that was your favorite. So, he was turning into a werewolf or something, and then he like got stuck mid transformation.
Yeah, he apparently was. I mean, that's all I can gather was he was turning into a werewolf because he kept asking for Silver to kill him,
right?
And they eventually like handcuff him with some silver handcuffs that one of the guys just happened to have, which is just a hilarious horror trope, anyways.
Right.
So he starts melting down into this skeleton creature, and it's hilarious because as he's melting down and just dying, he's just continually talking shit the entire time. And that guy was hilarious, right? That was my favorite one. It was called One Time in the Woods.
Right. I thought it was funny whenever, he's like all melted down and stuff, and then that the girl gets turned into one too, and then same thing happens to her basically. And then they're both sitting there like arguing, and then he's just like, well, I can just not talk all day, and they're just like bantering back and forth. I thought it was funny, but I think my favorite segment from this was the 4th of July thing, where they were making fun of the trope of slashers. No matter what you do to them, they never die.
Right.
So, you know, they cut the dude in half, and he like comes back and he strangles, or he breaks somebody's neck with his legs. They shoot him and all this stuff, and he just doesn't die. And then finally she like shoves him into the wood chipper, and he's like, I'm your brother. And yeah, I just thought it was funny.
Yeah,
and then it had a really cool, you know, the gore gag where they like stuff his face full of fireworks.
Right.
That was pretty good. But so yeah, check out Scare Package on Shudder.
It's a gory good time.
Our shameless, you know, every episode Shudder plug.
Well, you know, Shudder's one of those companies that they just deliver, right? They deliver what horror fans want, and you know, they're on the right side of, you know, current events. Like actually today, Justin, I don't know if you saw that Shudder had those with Fright Rags. It was a collaboration t-shirt. Did you see that? They had the Fright Rags Shudder collab shirt, and it was, if you bought it, you got all proceeds went to the Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah.
And so I bought one of those, and my shirt actually came in today. So it's like they do things like that. So they're always on the right side of, if you follow them on Twitter, of current events. So it's just like, you know, they're an all-around good company so far of how they're managed and who's in control of them, and just the way they curate what they put on their streaming platform. They're like any other service, right? They can't have everything. Like Netflix can't have everything because they have to pay licensing fees. But what they do put on there, you know, they rotate through pretty good, and you know, their originals are usually pretty gnarly. So,
oh yeah, I think Shudder is 99% perfect. The only thing that makes them not perfect is the fact that they do not sponsor this podcast. So,
what's up, Shudder?
Yeah. blackmassfilms.studio@gmail.com.
So but, our next thing that we viewed is a short from 2017 written and directed by Kate Dolan. This is called Cat Calls. So this is on Shudder as well. It's not a Shudder original, but it is on Shudder. You can check it out. It's only about 9 minutes long.
Yeah, so it's really easy to digest, because it's not like you're having to, you know, if you don't have a lot of time, but you're like, hey, I want to watch something really cool. I mean, this is going to take up like 8 or 9 minutes of your time tops. But it's worth it. I really enjoyed this. Yep.
So not the official synopsis, but what this is, Justin, is...
Go ahead.
Do you wanna...
Sometimes, so for those of you who don't know how we do this podcast right now, since we're having to do this remotely, like we basically just voice chat each other and we record at the same time. So sometimes we'll have an idea at the same time, and then we'll go to say something, and then it's like we cancel each other out, and then we both just kind of stop and wait for the other one. So
we get so goddamn excited that we talk over each other. So the synopsis of this is essentially this guy, right? He is a creeper. He's driving around town, basically looking for women, right? Because he is, what do you call him? Not a flasher, but he's somebody that likes to expose himself to
an exhibitionist.
Is that what that's called?
Is that what those are called?
I have no fucking clue.
I don't know. I don't expose myself to people.
But anyway, so he's driving around town. He sees these women walking, these two women walking, and he calls them over to his car. They come over, and he flashes his genitals at them. And, you know, of course, they're all grossed out, as they should be. And then he takes off. And he goes somewhere, and he pleasures himself. And then he ends up pulling up to his house, puts on his wedding ring like a true scumbag, and basically goes into his house like nothing ever happened. But before he goes into his house, he sees one of the girls just appear on the road. He's like, oh shit, what the fuck? That was weird. So he goes in his house. His wife is leaving. She looks like she's a nurse or something like that. She's leaving for like the night shift. And next thing you know, these girls that he exposed himself to, they were the wrong ones, Justin. What happened from there? What happened from there?
So basically, not to spoil anything really, because it's kind of blatantly in the title, but they are like werecats pretty much. So there's a lot of really cool sequences where he's in the house. And, you know, how about that one shot where like his wife has now been killed and he looks across the room and like in the other room, she's eating his wife or whatever. And she's like,
not to spoil anything.
Well, look, dude, I mean, I'm not giving away the rest of it. I mean, it is only 9 minutes, but it's called Cat Calls. Like they
not
play
to
on this.
Anything, his wife dies.
Okay. But that's like, I mean, you know, she's going to die as soon as like they show up. But yeah, I just thought that was a really cool shot. Like with her in the other room and he sees her and she's like in her cat human form. So
oh yeah, where she has like the glowing eyes and she's kind of like perched over the woman and she's eating her or whatever, and she's half cat, half human. She has that. She looked really cool. Like, you know, she had the leather jacket on and all that shit. Like that character looked super rad. But
I just think this was a fun little film. I think I wanted more, but it was almost like this was like a concept kind of thing. I haven't really seen any more of this because it ends very, you know, open when they're walking.
Ambiguously.
So it's like, you know, it's daytime now and they're walking and those two dudes start cat calling them and they both turn around and then, you know, they smirk because, well, they're about to fuck shit up.
Well, I think it being a short was perfect. The way it was written, like, I mean, I would watch a longer formed version of this if they made it more or less like a revenge film, you know, like maybe something happened to one of the women, you know, and then they
get like in a I Spit on Your Grave kind of direction.
Right. You know, I would watch it then, but like, I think in its current form, just being a short is what they needed, you know, because all of a sudden we're just like, you know, like these werecats for no reason. But
yeah, I can get that. They definitely have to flesh out like some kind of backstory. But yeah, so
speaking of backstory.
Yep.
Did you happen to catch those 2 John Carpenter tracks that were released?
I have not yet, but for those of you who don't know, John Carpenter is like a master of scoring things. He's scored basically all of his films, and he's kind of I would almost consider him, it's kind of a big deal, you know. I'd almost consider him like the godfather of like synth stuff, because, you know, even in the 80s, if you listen to I mean, of course he scored Halloween, but the score for Halloween 2 got a little more, they played with some more synth stuff in that, but then like Big Trouble in Little China and Escape from New York and those scores. And then, so he's apparently just released 2 original tracks. They're not for a film or anything, right? It's just, he just felt like,
no, they're just original cool tracks. Yeah. Unclean Spirit and Skeletons. Yeah. So he hasn't released just original tracks that weren't for a film, that weren't for a movie score, and I think since 2006 or something like that. So, you know, he's really just moving forward with his music. If you follow him on Instagram, you know, like he talks a lot about it. So if you don't
his son
follow him,
does a lot of stuff too.
Right.
They helped him with the 2018 Halloween soundtrack.
Right.
Which that soundtrack is, I could actually just listen to that soundtrack. I
have that on vinyl.
To some of the deep stuff on that. Like, there's some creepy sounding shit on that soundtrack. Even like just reimagined or revamped versions of, you know, songs or like some of the score that was in the original 1978 Halloween. I feel like they just amped it up and turned up the creepy factor. But
so who's your favorite film score or composer?
That's not something I've really thought about too much, I guess. Especially as far as like horror films. You know, I'm going to go with John Williams.
John Williams. Okay. I mean,
it's just like, it's just, I don't really ever think about who's doing it too much, I guess. So
Well,
if you were to straight up ask me, the only people I can really think of is like John Williams, or what's that other guy? Hans Zimmer, isn't that one?
Hans Zimmer's pretty sick, yeah. So for the longest time, my favorite was Bernard Herrmann. He's the one that did like Taxi Driver, and I think he did Psycho and Vertigo. Like he did stuff for Hitchcock. And he's the one that did the Twisted Nerve score. You know, the whistle from Kill Bill.
Oh,
You know,
yeah,
that whole thing.
yeah.
Like he originally, so he's the one that scored that original song. It was called Twisted Nerve. But so I've always loved Bernard Herrmann. I've always loved Hans Zimmer. But I think most recently, like I've really been getting into Henry Manfredini, the guy that does all the Friday the 13th stuff. And if you listen to just the scores of the Friday the 13th films, they are like brilliant. So Henry Manfredini.
I definitely like the scores for like the early Friday the 13th, because they like, I don't know, something about those, the scrapes and the strings and the dissonance and all that stuff. It was just like that stuff back in the day to me was creepier than, you know, some of these films that tried way too hard.
I mean, he's done so much more than Friday the 13th too, but like his Friday the 13th stuff, I think is really, really recognized. You know, he did like House 2, Slaughter High, the horror show Spring Break from 1983.
So he's done like some heavy hitting horror shit.
He's done a lot of stuff. The Hills Have Eyes Part 2. So he's done a lot of stuff, but his Friday the 13th stuff, hands down, just like genius work.
Well, speaking of scores and bringing this back to John Carpenter, not only am I going to have to listen to those, but did you know that once upon a time in about 1998, John Carpenter made a film about vampires? And this whole episode just happens to be about vampire films. So we are going to jump over to talking about some vampire films. So you want to throw off some honorable mentions just so people don't come at us with torches and pitchforks for not talking about some of these movies that, you know, some people might consider, you know, more favorite than what we have on our list, but we're just going to talk about some of our favorite films.
Okay, so as I run down through these, I want us each to mention something real quick about what we like about them.
I'm down.
And we'll keep it real quick so we have plenty of time to talk about our main films. So honorable mention number 1 is Blade. So Blade was super awesome because I really think that Wesley Snipes being the main character was a good step in the direction, right? I think it was a good step in the right direction, not just for Blade's a Marvel story, is it not?
Yeah.
And, you know, for a Marvel horror crossover, I think having Wesley Snipes as the main character was a good move. He did excellent in the film. And the blood rave part of that was just super gnarly.
That's the thing I was going to say is the fucking blood rave. But no, I like all 3 Blade films, actually. Blade 1 and 2 are, you know, they're classics, the first one especially, but you know, crucify me, whatever. My favorite of the trilogy is Blade Trinity, just because it's like, so you've got Blade, it's this vampire film. You know, he's like a half vampire, daywalker, whatever you want to call him, and he's a vampire slayer. Well, now it's like, he's beat every, you know, he just picks off vampires like it's nothing. And now it's like, okay, well, now you're fighting the OG. It's like fucking Dracula.
Right.
So, and then Ryan Reynolds' character in he's actually from the comics too. Nothing like the portrayal Ryan Reynolds did, but he still did a good job in that film.
So second honorable mention, Justin, is 30 Days of Night. What did you like about that one?
Okay, 30 Days of Night. I love how, you know, you take the traditional idea of like a vampire, but now you've put it in Alaska at the time of year where they've got 30 days of pure night. So what better time for vampires to feed? Plus you're like isolated, and I think they handle that really well when they show, you know, some people might ask, well, why don't townspeople just leave if they know this is going to happen? Well, some of them do, and some of them just choose to stay.
Right.
But I like the design of the vampires too. And some of these scenes, it's just like, imagine being in a place like that where it's 30 days of nighttime and you're being hunted by this horde of vampires.
It's cold. It's terrible. It's dark.
Yep.
And,
Josh Hartnett is your fucking sheriff.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're already screwed. But 30 Days a Night, super rad. Like you said, I really like the entire setup. It just makes sense what they did. And Josh Hartnett, of course, he's pretty rad when he's in the right role.
Yeah, he's a good enough actor. And just as long as he's not in Halloween 20 years later, we're okay.
And then I think my favorite scene from this, I mean, there's a bunch of really cool ones, but I like when the girl is essentially, she comes face to face with one of the vampires and she says God, and he says no God. And it's like just such a pivotal moment in the movie. Just like the amount of fear that it instills in her is just, super gnarly. But 30 Days a Night is great. It just works. It's more of a modern idea on vampires because, like you said, why hasn't Dracula ever visited Alaska?
Right? It's like
it would be the perfect place.
Prime time feeding for 30 straight days. So another film that is definitely an honorable mention for me is From Dusk Till Dawn directed by Robert Rodriguez. This was also actually didn't Tarantino actually write the screenplay for this, I think, but this just, I don't know what it is. There's something about the desert aesthetic or, a Mexican setting and vampires that I just fucking love.
Right.
And
same.
This film delivers on all of that. Plus, I mean, you've got Tom Savini, you've got Greg Nicotero, both like actually acting in this.
You have,
of course, I mean,
Salma Hayek,
George Clooney,
Harvey Keitel, Juliette Lewis.
Yep.
Like you've got some
Tarantino
heavy hitters
himself. So Danny Trejo, right?
Right.
Danny Trejo. So
he's in everything. He's a non-mention because he's just in everything. You just assume he's in every movie.
Yeah, he's in fucking Spy Kids, dude.
I mean, hey.
And Machete. Well, he is Machete. Off topic for real quick. That is really weird because supposedly that's supposed to take place in the same universe. Machete and Spy Kids.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, look into it a little bit. We're not going to dive into that here, but yeah, just look into it on your free time. That's pretty weird. Like it's not official, but it's like a implied, just funny little Easter egg. But anyway, so yeah, From Dusk Till Dawn. I think the vampires in this look fucking awesome.
Right.
And I think the story is fucking cool. They actually did a series. I think it's a Netflix original, but I'm not sure. It's a couple years old. From Dusk Till Dawn is bullshit. I mean, it's literally they took the film and they added a bunch of filler. Like they broke it up into episodes and then added a bunch of filler to make it stretch out across like hour-long episodes or half-hour episodes or whatever. But it follows the exact same story, just without the badassery that comes with, Tom Savini having a fucking cock gun on his like belt or whatever.
Right. And yeah, he had like the cock revolver and old Tom Savini. Did you know this had a budget of $19 million?
Really?
Yeah. So you could tell they did something different with the special effects makeup, because before vampires sort of always were, I don't want to say suave, but you had Nosferatu, which looked pretty gnarly, but then they went into, like the Bela Lugosi, and you had like Dracula, and you had like Bram Stoker's Dracula,
right.
Like the Gary Oldman. But this one, they made the vampires look more like bat-faced. Like they actually had the faces of bats.
And they were kind of like demons too, like demon-faced looking bat kind of. And if you look at the way that the vampires are in this film, that actually is kind of where, I mean, between this and another film that we're going to talk about later in our top two, the way that they started making vampires look after that was modeled after, that and From Dusk Till Dawn. Like if you look at Buffy the Vampire Slayer and stuff like that, where they had like the, their faces were just, I don't know, it had that more creature look.
Right.
Instead of just this like
more human form.
Sexy human, like, socialite kind of dude. But
so when you look at this movie, Justin, I don't know. I know you've noticed, but if you're a casual viewer, maybe you haven't noticed that as the vampires are getting killed, they're bleeding green, right? You have green slime
Yep.
spewing everywhere, and the reason for that is Tarantino knew that if he overused blood with how many vampires and how many exploding vampires were going to be spewing red blood, he wouldn't have got, he would have got an NC-17 rating from the MPAA. So he said that if I knew that I used green, they couldn't, push me into that higher rating that he didn't want to be in. So it was kind of smart on his part. So that's why all the vampires are essentially bleeding green in this, or spewing green slime. It's because, it was a creative choice, but it was also like a, hey, fuck you, MPAA. Like, you can't do anything about this
Right.
green,
Right. Well, it definitely would have. They would have made them cut a lot of that out to get the R rating. So if it's green, you can apparently have as much blood as you want. So that is From Dusk Till Dawn. Now, this next film, the reason it's only on honorable mentions is because, god damn, this is a slow burn.
It is.
But it's Salem's Lot, which is, of course, a Stephen King adaptation. Now, I do like the way that this is, written and directed, and it's directed by Tobe Hooper, so, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre director. It's just, this, like, 1990s It wasn't originally a straight-up movie. It was a 2-part miniseries. So it's 2 hours long if you watch the whole thing.
It's like all Stephen King stuff from the 90s, right? Like, everything was a series, and then they just like, well, you know what? This is long as fuck. Let's make it a movie.
This was popular, so we'll make it a movie. But
yeah,
it's
so
good, but goddamn.
My favorite part about Salem's Lot, like you said, it's a slow burn, but it's it definitely looks like a 70s movie, and I don't want to say it's cerebral, but it's not just straight horror. There's definitely a storyline to it, right? It's not just like a slash and gory vampire movie. I mean, there's some of that in it, but it's more or less a storyline, right? It follows a novelist and a young horror fan. They attempt to save a small New England town which has been invaded by vampires. So a lot of times in vampire movies, it's just like, let's cut to the gore. Let's get to the sexy parts of the movie. Like, this one is like, nope, guess what? You better chill the fuck out because we got a story, right? But like the most gnarly part about this is just the way that the vampire looks. Like, I absolutely love the way he looks in this with the pale blue skin or gray skin and the yellow eyes, and how his fangs are actually on his front 2 teeth, right? And how his teeth are all jagged. Kind of looks like
he's like a blue Nosferatu,
right?
Like a purple Nosferatu.
And I believe that guy that played that was Reggie Nalder. Reggie nailed her. I don't know, but I don't know anything about the actor. Maybe I should know. Maybe he's done some really cool things, but just his vampire depiction is like hands down one of the coolest looking ones.
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, I mean, it's worth watching. But, you've got to have the time and the patience to watch it as a whole. But if you want to get the original experience, you can watch it in hour segments. But so speaking of how he looked like Nosferatu, so you've got Nosferatu on here, which is a series I have not watched yet. I need to. I just haven't started it. So I'm going to let you talk about this one.
All right, guys. So Nosferatu again. I mean, I hate to be that guy, but I'm plugging Shudder again. It's a Shudder original. Nosferatu came out in 2019. It's a episodic show. So right now they just had a second season come out. So I can't speak on a second season. I did watch the first season though, and I thought it was really good and had an interesting take on vampires. So this is spelled NOS4A2. So essentially Nosferatu. So quick synopsis.
Real quick, I want to interrupt because if you actually don't have Shudder, you can actually watch this on AMC. So I think this is an AMC original, but Shudder has it also.
Well, there you go. Same company, right? So real quick, the synopsis
it's all the
is
big conglomerates.
Charlie Manx, a seductive immortal who feeds off the souls of children, has his whole world threatened when a young woman in New England discovers she has a dangerous gift. So this also takes place in New England. Shout out Stephen King. He didn't have anything to do with this, but shout out Stephen King. But guess what?
The reason I want to live in like New England, but go ahead.
Stephen King didn't have anything to do with this, but one Joe Hill did. Joe Hill, Justin, is who?
Stephen King's son.
There you go. So, of course, you know, they set a lot of their stories in New England, and you know, that's where they're from, or that's where Stephen King is from. I'm not sure. His son was probably born there too, but so a lot of stuff takes place in Connecticut, Maine, you know, Boston, a lot of places up there. But so
I mean, you could tell somebody that Stephen King did this though, because Joe Hill looks just like his fucking dad.
Oh yeah, they're like a doppelganger. But so Joe Hill wrote the novel, and then, you know, they took it and they made it into an episodic show. So why this is so cool is it's not overtly a vampire. It is, but it isn't. But this guy, Charlie Manx, he basically drives around and he's trying to keep himself young, and he feeds off of children, like it said, and he takes them to a place called Christmas Land. So he basically tells all the kids, hey, I'm going to take you to Christmas Land, and the kids get excited because, hey, they think they're going to go to the North Pole and meet Santa Claus. He takes them there, and basically this is just basically like a feeding ground for him. So he takes them, drops them off, and he feasts upon them when he needs to feed, because when he feeds, it keeps him young. And he drives this old Rolls-Royce Wraith around, and that's sort of his vehicle to travel through time and travel through this space-time continuum, right? And then he goes head-to-head with this girl. What's her name? I can't remember.
Vic McQueen?
Yeah, Vic McQueen, right? Played by Ashley
I'm looking
Cummings.
at the cast and crew. Yeah, I'm looking at the cast and crew on the AMC website. So I wanted to ask real quick. So, because I haven't read the novel either. Is this like a... It almost sounds like they're taking... like, you know, the legend of like Elizabeth Bathory and putting it with like a vampire kind of thing.
Yeah, sort of.
So he's not like actually a vampire, but instead of bathing in blood like Elizabeth Bathory to stay young, he's like, you know, feeding on. So that's pretty cool. He looks cool. Like the way, for one, he's played by Zach Quinto, who's a good actor anyway. But the way that he's kind of made up, like with the Widow's Peak, like he kind of looks like, you know, Dracula or something.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the show is pretty rad. I would say first season, at least, watch it. Like I said, I can't speak on the second season. I'm going to get into it maybe over the next couple weeks, but interesting take on vampires. One last one, Justin, that I don't have in our notes here that I want to throw an honorable mention out to, because I think it is one that took vampires in an interesting direction. It's from 2009. I'm pretty sure you probably saw it. It's Daybreakers. Did you ever watch Daybreakers?
I don't think I've watched it all the way through.
Okay, so quick synopsis.
And it's been like such a while, so I'll let you talk about that.
So quick synopsis of this is interestingly enough, in the year 2019, a plague has transformed almost every human into vampires. Faced with dwindling blood supply, the fractured dominant race plots their survival. Meanwhile, researcher works with a covert band of vamps on a new way to save humankind. So basically, this movie has, like I said, vampires have fed for so many years, and they have created so many vampires that they're running out of human blood to feast on. So throughout the movie, they are farming humans, right? Just to have blood. So sort of how we farm fish, how we farm, you know, livestock, right? They're doing the same thing with humans just to have blood. And then you have a couple humans that are out there that are still alive, but they're trying to navigate their way through this this vampiric world, right? What's cool about this one is the vampires' special effects makeup looks super rad. It goes back to the more bat-like vampires, Justin. But it's just a solid movie because it's an interesting idea. You have Ethan Hawke, William Dafoe in this, you know, so you have a star-studded cast.
Sam Neill's in that, right?
I think so.
Like I said, it's been a while, and I don't think I finished it. Not for any particular reason. Not like it was bad, but I think I was watching it in passing. It was on TV or something.
It's super cool. You know, the vampires drive around in these like self-driving cars that like have these shades that cover all the windows and shit. It's real interesting. Like I said, I'm for anything that kind of pushes that genre in a new direction, and that movie really did. So sort of like Nosferatu, it just kind of takes tropes and then kind of does something interesting with them. Speaking of tropes, Justin, I think we need to get into what most vampire films have, most of their traits and tropes. Yes. So, what do you got?
Vampire films are full of fucking tropes. I mean, you know, any like genre of films are, because you've got to have the key things that make it fit into that genre. But vampire films, I think, are one of the most guilty of having, you know, all of the same things, other than obviously, okay, so the vampires, like they live off blood. But, you know, most of the time they're very self-centered, self-serving. There's always sex, right? Sex, and more sex. Except if you're going, like, sometimes they'll go a different direction, like we talked about, like 30 Days of Night and stuff like that. But most of the time, a vampire is seductive. Even in films like From Dusk Till Dawn, where they're not necessarily sexy once they're turned into their actual, like, vampire self or vampire form.
I mean, they're always looking to nail the coffin, Justin. I'm just saying.
I mean, it's there, you know. But they still, like, entice you. You know, like Salma Hayek in that. She was, like, a belly dancer or exotic dancer or whatever. And she was still using, like, powers of seduction. But then once she turned into, like, her straight-up self, it's like, oh, shit. But, you know, most of the time they're, like, looking for a bride, whether they've, you know, lost one in the past or there's unrequited love or whatever. And then, of course, there's, you know, the Transylvania thing with the accent. I think one funny thing, this isn't horror, but, you know, Andrew and I are dads, so we've seen, you know, Hotel Transylvania more than a couple times, right? So, you know, how about when Dracula, he meets the human dude, I don't even know his name, but he's like, he's like quoting him, and he's like, I want to suck your blood, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, where do you get this blah, blah, blah? I don't say this. But it's like, oh my, you know, if you ask someone, hey, you know, you seen Dracula? Someone will say something like that, to that effect, right, or whatever.
So real quick before you move past that point. So the funny thing about it is, and they mention it, I think Eli Roth has a show and he mentions it, or somebody mentions it, but
the history of horror.
Yeah, Bela Lugosi was Hungarian, right? He played first Dracula on screen. And since he was Hungarian, he had a thick Hungarian accent. And that's just why Dracula has always sounded that way. So throughout the years, many adaptations of Dracula, everybody tried to have that accent because they just assumed this is the Transylvanian accent. This is how Dracula is supposed to sound. But they're literally just mimicking the way Bela Lugosi talked.
Right. So it's technically really Hungarian.
Right. So you're technically just ripping off Bela Lugosi, which is, I mean, if you're going to rip somebody off, I mean, that dude is the GOAT.
He was the OG. He was, I mean, it's arguable, you know, if he was the best Dracula, but he was definitely the OG.
Yeah.
So, you know, then you've got...
They're Bat Boys, bro.
The Bat Boys, man. So, you know, turning into a vampire bat and that sort of thing.
Listen, Justin, as cheesy as it is in every vampire movie, when you see a vampire, like if it's a serious vampire movie and you see him turn into a bat, it's cheesy as fuck, but I still get super excited. I'm like, God damn, yes. Turn into a fucking bat.
Right?
You know, like,
hell yeah. Yeah. You know, let's see. So, you know, they die from beheading and stakes to the heart. And that's not as much as a trope, or it's not as much of a trope as I would just say that's more of like the lore itself of a vampire. It's kind of, that just comes with the character. You know, the same with telekinetic powers, whether it's, you know, actually conveyed as telekinetic or it's just them having some kind of
hypnosis or
some kind of hypnotic kind of thing. And they've got servants, which they're called familiars. Then there's, of course, the no reflections and mirrors. They don't like crucifixes or holy water. Now, this is also, you know, it just depends on what film you're watching, because some films like Interview with the Vampire, for example, which is another honorable mention, he's talking about crucifixes, and he's like, I'm actually, you know, pretty fond of crucifixes. And then in, you know, say Fright Night, you know, they try to kill him with holy water and stuff, or he does a crucifix too, I think, and he tells him, you know, you've got to believe for it to work.
Well, yeah. So, also, what's another one of those things that kill him that we didn't even mention yet? It's garlic, and that works in some movies, right? But in like Lost Boys, he's like, they try and kill one of the dudes with garlic, and he's like, garlic doesn't work, dude, or something like that.
Yeah, and then he's like, garlic doesn't work, and he's like, no, do they have garlic or holy water in the bathtub?
They have garlic, and he tries to kill him with garlic, and then he pushes him into the
he's like,
bathtub
try,
of holy water.
then he says, try holy water death breath.
Yeah.
Yeah, but so it just depends on the story. Like, these are interchangeable things, but most of the time, when you think vampires anyway, you're gonna think of Dracula backing up in fear of Van Helsing's crucifix and stuff like that. Andrew has written in the notes here, seriously, vampires be laying pipe.
I'm just saying, Justin. So
again, because they are always like, sex. Like I said before, sex, and more sex.
Yeah, I mean, whether it's like Interview with a Vampire, like you mentioned, which was a movie that was ahead of its time. You had
Lestat was a hoe.
Right, you had Tom Cruise and you had Brad Pitt, and they were essentially a very homoerotic relationship.
Yeah. And then you also had a very young Kirsten Dunst.
Right. So, I mean, it's not just vampires either searching for their bride or trying to seduce their victims, but it's also like you take Bram Stoker's Dracula, you have the Brides of Dracula, which are 3 female vampires, and they're basically just having threesomes or foursomes with whoever they can have sex with to convert them over to vampires. So it's one of those things that there's always vampire sex. I mean, could you imagine if like Frankenstein was always fucking, or if like werewolves were always fucking? But no, I mean, it's like just vampires. That's vampires. You don't have like, guess what? Here's a demonic possession movie, but we're fucking. You know what I mean? It's always vampires.
Right.
Vampires are very sexual creatures.
Have a paranormal ghost movie where they're fucking, like, you got to give Patrick Swayze some credit, man.
Well,
Ghost?
I mean, Ghost was, yeah, well, I mean, that's true. That pottery scene was.
That pottery scene, yeah. But, I mean, yeah, like, they're always, crazy for Swayze. But, so, how about the shape-shifting trope?
Yeah.
In several of the Dracula films, he can turn into, like, that bat hybrid kind of thing, and then he turns into a wolf. Like, not a werewolf, but, like, just a straight-up wolf.
Yeah. Or they even
Children of the Night.
They even shapeshift into other people, right? I mean, vampires will often, shapeshift into another person to fool their victim, and then their victim is like, "Oh, hey, husband," and the next thing they know, they're like, "I'm just Dracula. Fuck you.
I want to suck your blood."
Like all of a sudden, it's like, "Oh my god," But yeah.
Which is kind of. This is just kind of we're filmmakers, so we overanalyze filmmaking things or story things. So it's like, have you ever wondered though why they need to do stuff like that if they've got? So think of how many powers a vampire has that are just kind of, well, if you have this other one, do you really need all these other powers? So like, for example, if they have the telekinetic hypnosis powers, then why do they have to shapeshift into other people to deceive someone?
Let me tell you what I would do.
I don't know.
If I was a vampire.
You tell me.
Here's how I'd utilize my powers.
Do.
So since I am a guy that has no reflections, I would just hang out in the Hall of Mirrors, and I would just kill people, because essentially that would render me invisible, would it not? Because it's mirrors all over the place, so I would essentially be invisible.
Well,
I would just be picking off carnival people.
You would be essentially invisible, unless, I mean, you're still, like, your physical self is still there. So at the right angle, someone's gonna see you.
You know what? Phone in a scientist.
Because
phone in a scientist.
If it's phone in a scientist, new segment every episode. No, you know what I'm saying? Like, if it was just one of those round rooms that's got a bunch of mirrors, like, you're gonna be standing in the middle of it. You won't have any reflections, but they'll see you. But if it's like a fun house maze kind of thing.
I'm talking about a fun house.
Yeah, you could definitely probably like figure out the layout. You'd have to like phone in like an engineer to figure out the exact angles and shit and get it down to a mathematical equation.
It's a good thing vampires are always super wealthy too. That's another trope. They're always fucking loaded with cash because they've been alive for 800 years.
Yeah, well, you've been alive for 800 years, so you've also got 800 years to figure out how the fuck to be at the right angle for this damn Hall of Mirrors.
So let's assume that you're a vampire that just works a regular job. Let's say you make $30,000 a year. I guess that's a regular job, right? I'm not sure. And times that by being alive for 800 years. Do you know the amount of wealth you would amass, not accounting for inflation?
Yeah, but what you're saying about especially our country's economic state is that if you want to be rich, you have to make $30,000 a year for 800 years.
So you're trying to tell me that vampires, I think, did very well during the Great Depression.
I mean, yeah, well, unless, you just turned into a vampire. But, hey.
Fangs and nails.
Vampires are always fucking rich anyway, though.
Fangs and nails. Vampires always have fangs. Like, that just works, right? That's how they...
Well, funny enough, the OG Dracula, Bela Lugosi, did not have fangs.
I wonder when that came about.
It was, I'm pretty sure Christopher Lee's Dracula was the first Dracula to have fangs. Now, Nosferatu had fangs.
He did.
But most people, when you think vampires or vampire films, a lot of people don't even know who the hell Nosferatu is unless, like, you're into horror films. But, they automatically go to Dracula. But Bela Lugosi didn't have fangs. So I'm going to look that up real quick while you talk about the fangs and nails, but I'm pretty sure it was Christopher Lee.
So, yeah, vampires, of course, fangs. That's what we know them for. That's what we dress up. That's a staple when you're like, I'm going to be a vampire for Halloween. You get the plastic fangs. Or you go to Hot Topic and you're like, I'm going to get the little fangs that come in the little coffin case because I'm serious about my gothnicity. So nails, vampires normally always have long, creepy nails. That's one thing that they always try and hide from people when they're trying to conceal the fact that they're a vampire is their fangs and their nails. Often, vampires, they wear some sexy shirts. Those dudes are all about blouses, right? Blouses that would make Prince blush. You're talking about like silk shirts with the little Fabio lace ties or little like rope ties at the top. Blouses like a medieval king. So they normally, not always, but they normally dress like they're from like the 16th century. And they're always well dressed, well manicured, and normally just like I said, since they're so seductive, they're always looking good, right? Male or female vampires. And it is essentially the way they seduce their victims and make it an easy kill for themselves.
Right.
And again, like we said, servants, they always will use people to do their dirty work for them if they can.
Yeah. Familiars.
Okay.
So, as Blade, he gets so mad every time he finds a familiar. Because remember that was in like the first Blade, anytime he'd come across one, he'd just like have that snarl and he'd be like, familiars.
Goddamn Wesley Snipes. So rad.
Yeah, I know. But so talking about the fangs real quick before we dive into some of our favorite vampire films. So apparently it wasn't until, according to CBR.com, Movie Legends revealed when did Vampire Fangs make their film debut. It's a long ass URL, but it wasn't until a Turkish adaptation of Dracula based on a Turkish novel, Kazuk Voyvoda, that translated and slightly altered Stoker's original novel, that the famous Vampire Fangs were first seen on screen. It doesn't tell me what year that is, but apparently, it was 5 years before Terence Fisher directed the British adaptation of Dracula, which Christopher Lee obviously, played Count Dracula. So
you were pretty spot on with that. You were pretty spot on with that.
Yeah, I didn't know that Turkish adaptation existed though. So
no, me neither.
But yeah, so OG Bela Lugosi Dracula did not have fangs.
So I think, Justin, it's time that we jump into a quick break and then come back and talk about our top vampire films.
Sounds like a plan. How's it going, creeps? One quick mid-episode break to tell you a little more about our sponsor. Since 2016, Everblack Coffee Company has delivered exceptional single-origin coffee and high fives all over the world. They understand that a cup of coffee is so much more than something you drink. That's why they source their beans from farms that only use fair trade and organic growing practices. When you buy coffee from Everblack, you can be certain that you're getting the highest quality coffee available by ethical means only. It's time to start looking at coffee differently. Head over to everblackcoffee.com and grab a bag for yourself. It's deliciously dark. Now back to the show. Welcome back. So if that commercial doesn't make you want to buy some Everblack coffee, then you either just don't like coffee or just you have bad taste in coffee. So we are going to dive into some of our favorite vampire films. We've already talked about, our honorable mentions, which for some of you listening to this, those might be some of your favorite vampire films. I actually just realized during the honorable mentions, I mean, we've talked about the film a lot, or these two films a lot, but we didn't, shout out Nosferatu and Dracula, like the OG.
Yeah, we did.
So those
we
are.
Didn't shout out John Carpenter's Vampires either from 1998.
Well, I will see. I've got that right here on VHS. I low key. Actually, yeah, I did. That's how I transitioned. Remember? So you're attacking my transition game now.
Yeah, but you didn't talk about it much,
Well,
right?
I mean, there's not a lot to
it.
say. I mean, so this film originally was
you didn't talk
actually
about James Woods being an asshole.
Well, James Woods is an asshole. Yeah, he's like the Ted Nugent of the acting world. This was actually originally, and it's still here in the notes as such. This was in my top picks, but we've replaced it with something we both watched this week, and that's going to be the first one we talk about here. But I mean, John Carpenter's Vampires, like, I do enjoy this film as just as a movie in general. It's got a really good story, I think. I mean, there's nothing flashy or special about it, but the synopsis is recovering from an ambush that killed his entire team, a vengeful vampire slayer must retrieve an ancient Catholic relic that should it be acquired by vampires will allow them to walk in sunlight, which is then going to piss Blade off. But
well, the sick thing about it, is how we talked about how they take vampire tropes and the vampire story and do something a little different with it.
Right.
The thing I like about vampires, Justin, is I like that they said, okay, well, this militia is basically working for the Catholic Church.
Right.
Because I thought that was a cool twist because it's always been like, okay, well, it's just like rogue individuals, like, let's kill fucking vampires. And this one, it's like, well, we work for the Catholic Church, and we all know that the Catholic Church is all powerful and, loaded with cash. So it would seem realistic, right? That in real life, if there were vampires, that the Catholic Church would be like, involved.
True. I mean, I did think that was really cool. Also, how badass, I'm a Jeep Wrangler dude. Like, if you've listened to this podcast, you've heard, Andrew make a couple little jabs about that, or not jabs, so to speak, but, so there's a fucking references. Yeah. So there's a Jeep Wrangler in this film, and basically the whole opening sequence is they go into this, they found a nest of vampires in this like abandoned house in the middle of nowhere. It's like all dilapidated and shit. And they go in, and James Woods, as much of an asshole as he is, as, an actor, I mean, well, his character's kind of dickish too. There's some questionable dialogue in this film, but he has a crossbow, and he shoots him with a bolt and then attaches it to the cable that is on the winch of the Jeep. And then Daniel Baldwin is standing outside, who, by the way, I think does the best acting in this film. But he activates the motorized winch and drags the vampires out of the house into the sunlight, and then they just combust into flames, and it's just such an epic way to kill vampires. But again,
I mean, there's cool ass kill scenes in this for sure.
Oh, yeah. And then, again, this takes place in the desert. So same with From Dusk Till Dawn. There's the desert, I think this is in New Mexico. So, this film, it's a straightforward vampire movie. It's got some really good scenes, really good, some good acting. It's just a cheesy, 1998 film, and it's directed really well. Of course, it's John Carpenter, so it was written by Don Jacoby, stars James Woods, Daniel Baldwin, Cheryl Lee, Thomas Ian Griffith. So check it out. I mean, it's worth it. It's just we started to question why it was like on our top list the more we started talking about some of these other films. So that being said, that out of the way, this is a film that we both recently watched, and I don't know why it took me so long to watch it, but it is What We Do in the Shadows from 2014. Now, this is the film, not the show. So this is directed by Jermaine Clement, written by Taika Waititi, and the synopsis is Deacon, Vladislav, Viago,
and Viago.
Yeah, okay. So I forget. I left him out. My bad. Viago, Deacon, and Vladislav are vampires who are finding that modern life has them struggling with the mundane, like paying rent, keeping up with the chore wheel, trying to get into nightclubs, and overcoming flatmate conflicts. If you don't know what a flatmate is, that's just basically British talk for a roommate. So this film, it's filmed like a documentary. It's a documentary crew following these roommates that are all vampires, and they're all from various different time periods. And I just thought this was fucking hilarious. Like,
it was amazing.
Yeah.
So there's also the fourth roommate, Peter, that lives down in the basement. He essentially
is Nosferatu.
Yeah, essentially Nosferatu, and then they bring on two other guys. They bring on the guy Nick, which is hilarious in his own right because he's the one running around telling everybody, "You know Twilight?
That's
I'm
me.
That guy from Twilight."
Yeah, that's me.
Yeah.
And
then Stu, right?
Stu.
They bring in the human guy.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Nick, whenever you were talking earlier about, the bat trope, I was trying to hold in laughter because all I thought about was whenever Nick and Deacon get into a fight after they leave that restaurant because Deacon's mad that Nick was telling everybody about him being a vampire. And they start fighting, but they turn into bats, and they're like they're chasing each other around and shit.
I like that he rips his jacket because they both wearing that same
he rips his
fucking
jacket. And he's like, I fucking love this jacket, man.
What is it like? It's like, I don't know. It's that thing that like all the My Chemical Romance guys always wear, like the marching band jacket or whatever.
Yeah.
And there's a name for it. I don't know what the freaking name is, but yeah, he like rips his jacket. First, he's mad because the Nick guy is like always basically trying to do stuff like him, like basically dressing the same as him and just taking the vampire thing up a notch, right? And it just pisses him off. It's hilarious. This show is
all the other vampires in this, they've been vampires for like hundreds and hundreds of years, and Nick was just turned into one.
Right.
Like in modern day. So he's like, he reminds me of someone that would have been on like Jersey Shore. So he's like, if think of like a Guido vampire, that's Nick.
Yeah. But I don't know. It's just everything about it because it pokes fun at all the traits and tropes of vampires, and it just the stuff that you think. The stuff that vampires in every other movie ignore, this kind of like dives deeper into it, like where they live or how do they go through everyday life, or their roommates. And, there's funny scenes where they have it out with a group of werewolves that live in the same town.
Fucking brilliant scene.
Yeah, the werewolves are hilarious because there's a scene where the lead werewolf guy, if you've watched Flight of the Conchords, another Jermaine Clement show from back in the day, it's the guy that plays their manager, plays the leader of the werewolves, right? And so he's telling all these young werewolves that are, I guess he just recruited, right? Because they have a pack and he's the alpha male. He's telling them, make sure that you wear loose clothing because when you transform, you're going to grow like twice the size and you're just going to rip out of your jeans. So he's telling them to wear track pants and all this shit. And
it's like, how big you get when you transform?
Yeah, so eventually all the werewolves later on, they're just all like butt ass naked after they transform because they didn't take his advice. It's just stupid.
How about
stuff
the dude that he's like, because they locked themselves to the tree? He's like, how about the dude that got the combination lock and forgot his combination?
That'd be me.
Yeah. And he's like, why'd you get a combination lock? Well, I lost my key last time. Yeah. And he's like, just try 4 zeros. It's usually, that's the default, right?
Yeah. It's so there's so many little things, and it's not necessarily raunchy humor in this either. Like if you have, if you have a teenage kid, they could probably watch this, and they would be they would probably find it hysterical.
Right.
But you have all the funny things in it. You have the Beast. They keep referencing the Beast. It's like Vladislav's
It's his
his
ex-lover.
arch enemy, right? And they make it look like it's going to be this big nasty
Well, right.
monster.
Yeah,
and
they
just-
show like these illustrations of it, and it's like a giant like creature thing, and then you meet her, and it's his ex-girlfriend.
right. It's I don't know, but yeah. So what we do in the shadows. Haven't watched the series yet, but definitely the movie.
So
you watched the
I
series.
tried. I watched the first episode, and not to take anything away from the series, because I've heard a lot of good things about it. You know, I've heard other horror podcasts talk about it. I've seen articles talking about it and praising it. I messed up by watching the film first, because
Right.
I liked the characters so much and the way it was written and the actual just the story direction. The series isn't the same characters. So it's also not the same cast. It's not the same story.
Which kind of sucks.
Yeah.
Because now I'm looking at stills from it, and I'm like, well, this kind of looks like just a ripped off version. I mean, it could be great.
Right.
I
Well,
mean, I
it's
know
not
you
even
said it
it's not
sucks,
even
but-
like they took the film and tried to make it into a series. It's completely different. It's a different house, a different characters, a different time period, a different story. I mean, and it's got its funny moments, but it's once you watch the first one, I think the characters are written so well that you like these characters. And, you know, as you should, like you care about these characters. And then you start to watch the series, and all you can think about is, well, I want more of, you know, Vlad and
More
Deacon and
Vladislav.
Vladislav the poker, as they call him, instead of
Oh god,
the
that scene.
impaler. The scene. So Stu, the dude they bring in, he's a human, and he's like a techie. And he sets him up with like internet and computers and stuff, which that whole little like montage is just hilarious anyway, of them learning how to use the internet and stuff. But so he's teaching Vladislav the poker how to use Facebook. And he's like, so here, you know, you can look at her pictures, you can send her a message, you can poke her. And then he just pauses for a second and looks at Stu, and he's like, yes. And it's just
It's little things like that, right? Little things you have to catch that are hilarious about
Right.
it, because it's not always like laugh out loud hilarity. I mean, there are parts like that, but it's just like,
all right.
you know, it's just sort of like a funny mental giggle the entire way through.
The
because
same
it's
way
just
with
nonstop funny.
Yeah, I thought the same thing with like, you know, the Lost Boys references and
Oh my god, that was the best part to me.
yeah, and then the Bram Stoker's Dracula reference when he goes to that the ball and
he has his
Vladislav's
hair like
hair is
Gary
like that.
Oldman.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's just this is definitely a fun film, and I liked it so much that it is what replaced John Carpenter's Vampires. So there you go.
Yeah.
So
What We Do in the Shadows. It is from what year is that from? Is it from
2014.
2014?
Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely watch it. And I mean, not horror, but if you haven't seen Flight of the Conchords with Jermaine Clement, it's equally as funny. It's about musicians in New York trying to make it. And it's pretty hilarious. So watch either one of those.
yep.
Definitely What We Do in the Shadows, though.
So
All right, Justin. So the next one, there is 3 really, really solid films right here. I'm not sure which one you
4.
want to talk about first.
4.
Oh, 4. Yep, 4. So I want to start out by talking about the one from 1992. You cool with that?
I'm down.
So 1992, the huge movie, Bram Stoker's Dracula, directed by Francis Ford Coppola, written by
Yep.
James V. Hart, and
It is-
Bram Stoker himself. It was based on the novel, right? So this is a Dracula movie that is pretty true to its origins.
Right. This is by far my favorite Dracula adaptation. That's why this is on the list and not, say, Bela Lugosi's Dracula or Christopher Lee's Count Dracula. Both amazing films in their own right. And of course, Bela Lugosi's the original. But I feel like from a movie standpoint and a casting standpoint, this is the definitive Dracula for me. I don't know how
This
you
one
feel.
had, well, yes and no. I mean, I like them about equal, right? I
don't
really
think
love
this
the
was
Bela
as
Lugosi
iconic.
Dracula.
I think Bela Lugosi's is the iconic Dracula, but if I'm going to sit down and watch a Dracula film, it's probably going to be this one.
So the thing that makes this one so fun, Justin, the Bram Stoker's from 1992, is the fact that it is just a larger than life movie, right? Like it is,
Right.
the sheer scope of it is just huge, right? So when you watch it, the set pieces are, extravagant. You have a star-studded cast. I mean, good God, you got fucking Gary Oldman.
goat.
You have, the goat. You have, oh my God, you have Keanu Reeves. You have Anthony Hopkins. You have Winona Ryder.
Yep.
Like, holy shit, like you could go on. There's more guys. What's the dude from Robin Hood Men in Tights? What's his name? He's in
I
this
always
too.
forget that dude's name, but
He's in everything. Let me look him up real quick.
I got you. It is. Maybe I don't
Cary
got
Ells.
you. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. That
Cary
guy.
Ells. So he's the guy that's in Robin Hood Men in Tights. He is, for me, I know him as the dude that always has the proper gentleman mustache.
Yes.
The guy's mustache is always on point. It's not like a Tom Selleck or like a Daniel Day-Lewis stash, but it is a very gentlemanly mustache that he has. So,
well, that's because Tom Selleck and Daniel Day-Lewis have like the
mustache,
that hard ass mustache, and then Cary Ellis has got the proper clean fancy mustache.
Right. But he's in this film as well, right? So the synopsis behind this, if you don't know about Bram Stoker's Dracula, it is the classic story. Centuries-old vampire Count Dracula comes to England to seduce his barrister Jonathan Harker's fiancée Mina Murray and inflict havoc in the foreign lands. So Jonathan Harker, I can't remember. I think he works for a bank. He's like going to Dracula's castle. And he's supposed to only go there for a short time. I can't remember what he's doing, but he's going there for a short time to do something for Dracula.
Well, he's signing his deeds because Dracula is buying property. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah, he's trying to buy property around England because he's taken dirt from so supposedly like Dracula takes dirt from his castle, right? And he like puts it in these properties in England. That way he can kind of
from his humble abode
go in between. Right. So, but anyway, so Jonathan Harker goes there and Dracula essentially keeps him captive. And throughout this, Keanu Reeves plays Jonathan Harker, which I hate to say this, I love Keanu. He does a terrible job in this movie.
Well,
definitely
I think there's a reason for that. So I love Keanu Reeves. I love Speed. The John Wick films are.
What?
Hey, do you not like Speed?
Yeah, I like Speed.
I was about to say, not only am I judging you for leaving out Sam Elliott's fucking mustache in the mustache discussion, but if you don't like Speed.
What's up, Sandy Bullock?
But Speed, fantastic acting. John Wick, fantastic acting. But in this, I think he was like fresh off of, Bill and Ted and stuff like that. And then, you've got fucking Anthony Hopkins and Gary Oldman and stuff. Like,
I mean, he was still, I don't want to say young in his career, but he was pretty young in his career. Like if he played a role like this now, he would blow it out of the freaking water.
Yeah, but back then, it's not that he was inexperienced per se, but the amount of experience that some of the other cast had was just, that's like.
I mean, Winona Ryder wasn't great in this either, but she's sort of like Johnny Depp in my opinion. She's sort of always the same.
Well, yeah, she plays the same character all the time. Like she played the same character in this that she played in Edward Scissorhands and Beetlejuice, and
which is a good character, right? But it's just always the same. It's just
that she's Kristen Stewart without the the straight face, but. Yeah, so Keanu Reeves, I think he does a well enough job, though, for that character, though, because he's supposed to kind of be oblivious at first and then just kind of like, oh, shit, what's happening? But I do think it's just because of what he was fresh off of in his career, because there's, certain scenes in this where he'll say something and he's still got that kind of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, like, whoa, dude, kind of like delivery of his lines. So I feel like that's what
Dracula.
I feel like that's what the issue was.
So yeah, I mean, this was this was in 92. So Keanu Reeves was coming off of like Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey,
Yeah.
My Own Private Idaho, Paul Abdul's Rush Rush, which I guess was a music video, right? Point Break, you know, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Which
so
Point
he was
Break is
playing,
good. Point Break was good.
Yeah. Well, so was My Own Private Idaho was pretty solid.
Point Break, is that the one I'm thinking of? Is that the surfing one? Yeah. Point Break was really good.
And My Own Private Idaho was Gus Van Sant with River Phoenix and James Russo and that.
Yeah, well, I don't like hearing Gus Van Sant's name because all I do is think of his Psycho remake. So, you know.
Yeah, we'll try and ignore that. But Gus Van Sant also did Elephant, which was a pretty pretty decent movie for what it was. But so there's a lot of key points to this. Like, my favorite parts of this movie are, like I said, just the over the top. Like Gary Oldman, you know, he has that infamous hair. Like, his whole costuming is on point in this. And
that just fucking battle armor, dude, that looks like muscle tissue.
Oh yeah. So like that whole opening scene though, right, was pretty sick because it goes and shows the whole like Vlad the Impaler side of Dracula, right?
Mm-hmm.
Shows him basically staking people. So
he's fighting Dracula's the Turks, right, in the war.
Right, he's fighting the Turks. So his whole thing is he's at war with the Turks, and the Turks fire an arrow with a note up into Dracula's castle. Dracula's bride sees the note, and the Turks basically trolled her and wrote a note, hey, you know, Dracula's dead.
Which is fucking genius if you think about it. Like, yeah, yeah, it's bold of them to assume that she's going to kill herself.
Right.
But at the same time, that's the kind of
she
like...
she throws herself out of the castle.
Yeah, it's kind of like, haha, well, guess what? By the time you get back, we've already one-upped you, dude.
Yeah, so she throws herself out of the castle into the moat.
Into the mulch.
Into the mulch. And Dracula's servants dig her out, or, you know, his whatever the fuck they're called, the people that are in his castle. I assume they're his
council,
servants.
I think, kind of.
I guess if you want to give them a proper term, I'm going to say servant.
Familiars.
So they have her laying there. So Dracula comes back from battle, all in there like, yeah, I'm fucking, you know, I just impaled 800 fucking dudes. Where's my bride at? It's time to lay pipe. And she's dead. And he's like, oh, fuck. So, like, all of a sudden he starts freaking out, stabs this crucifix. It starts bleeding. And the whole point of the movie is he becomes this demonic ass dude. He becomes Dracula. And because he starts denouncing Christ and all this other stuff.
Yeah, I fucking love that scene though, where he's basically like, well, because he literally says, he's like, so I go and I fight this holy war, and this is my thank you. He's like, I renounce God, and it was just like a brutal scene. Yeah, basically, thanks, man. The one thing that I cared about
Jesus,
in this
I thought me killing all these guys was gonna put you in favorable terms.
Right, I thought you were
not.
I thought we were friends.
I had to kill 801 dudes, not just 800.
Right.
But yeah, so like literally, he denounces Jesus, becomes this demonic Dracula, whatever, and
which when he's in his true form of is badass, by the way.
Right. And then so his bride's dead. Jonathan Harker comes along later on because Dracula, of course, lives forever. Jonathan Harker comes along modern day England times. Well, not modern day here. I don't know what time it takes place in. Probably the 1800s.
I'd say like 17, maybe.
Listen, phone in a historian.
Yeah.
So Jonathan Harker comes along and he's in there doing his deed thing with Dracula. He has no idea he's a vampire. He just knows he's in this creepy fucking castle. Dracula starts kind of slowly toying with Jonathan Harker's minds and making Jonathan Harker really ill, which is pretty cool because when he starts finding out about, you know, how he's Dracula, he sees him climbing down the side of the castle and shit like that. Right. Super creepy. But he
real
sees...
quick, I phoned in a historian called Google Search. And so just like the actual novel itself, this film takes place in 1897. So you were correct.
1800s.
Yeah.
1800s.
I don't know why the hell I was thinking 1700s. Like, this is obviously, you know, they're more like, they've got like gaslit street lights and shit. But yeah. Anyway.
So Dracula sees inside a locket of Jonathan Harker. He sees Winona Ryder. She plays the character of Mina, and he's like, "Oh fuck, she looks just like my dead wife. So I'm gonna steal her from Jonathan Harker." So Dracula does what Dracula does, and he starts seducing Mina from afar. Gets in her head, travels across to modern day England, leaves Jonathan Harker back there at his castle. Jonathan Harker starts having a threesome with those 3 Dracula brides, and they try and turn him into a vampire. Lane pipe ensues. Dracula turns into a werewolf and screws Lucy, which is another character.
Yep.
You got anything to add to this? I mean, I can just go on and on.
I just want to point out in the werewolf scene, because I've actually seen people debating whether that was a sex scene or not. Look, dude,
It was a sex scene.
Blood exploding from both sides was straight up subtext to represent sexual climax. Don't come at me.
It is 100%.
100%.
That's what Dracula does.
Right.
And Lucy, she was a great character. I don't want to talk yet about her vampire form, but the Kama Sutra scene was hilarious, where they're like looking at this old like medieval styled Kama Sutra book, her and Winona Ryder, and they're like talking about like Lucy is very sexually advanced.
Yeah.
And Winona Ryder is very reserved or conservative when it comes to that. So Lucy's like, look at this. I did this last night. And Winona Ryder's all like, ooh, like it's
well, she's advanced for the time, because I mean, she drops the book and there's a page where they're doing it like doggy style, and she's like, can a man and woman really do that? So they're just thinking like that stuff is wild, which is funny.
For the 1897, it probably was.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's why I say she's advanced for the time.
That's something only Dracula could deliver in 1897. Like Jonathan Harker wasn't doing that.
No. You want that?
But
you will come with me.
But the key points of this movie is Gary Oldman is Dracula. He played an excellent Dracula. You said it's your favorite Dracula.
Yes.
He looked gnarly as hell with his hair in that iconic scene where he's shaving Jonathan Harker and licks the blood off the razor blade.
Yep.
It sticks to the original story. So if you want the story of Dracula as it's told in the novel, this movie stays pretty close to it. Like we mentioned, the opening battle is super sick because it goes into the whole Vlad the Impaler stuff.
Yep.
The POV attack shots.
The Evil Dead style.
Right, where it's all point of view and super quick when he's the wolf creature. Very Evil Dead, like you said. Set design is elaborate. Supposedly Francis Ford Coppola did not want those sets. He wanted to just use like creative lighting. So luckily, the studio talked to him.
Yeah, they were like, "Hell no,
hell no, we're building some extravagant shit because tax write-off." So set design is amazing. Werewolf Lucy sex scene. Again, LOL, that's pretty hilarious, right?
Yeah.
I thought it was. And then one thing that got me is when Dracula cries purple tears.
Yeah, that was kind of just weird. We really dove into that pretty hard. I just do want to mention my favorite scene out of that entire film is when Keanu Reeves is, talking to him. He's like, okay, well, I've signed your deeds or whatever. And he sees the locket and he sees Mina. That shot is just fucking brilliant, where Gary Oldman is standing there looking at this locket, but the shadows on the back of the wall, Dracula's shadow is moving separately from his body, and he's like strangling Keanu Reeves. Right. So Keanu
Dracula,
heaves.
He don't play when it comes to Mina.
No, hell no. But yeah, so that's Dracula, 1992. And this next film, I had not seen until Andrew was like, now look, we're going to do a vampire episode. You got to watch this fucking film. And it's been on my radar for a while. But I'm glad that I checked it out. This is definitely, absolutely now one of my favorite vampire films ever. And that is 2008's Let the Right One In. So this is based on a novel. there is like an American version. It's called what? Let Me In or something like that.
Let Me In, yeah.
Yeah. So Let the Right One In is very. It's an indie film, like straight up art house horror film to me. It's directed by Thomas Alfredson. It is written by John Avid Lindquist, I think is how you say that, who also wrote the novel. So the synopsis of this is Oscar, an overlooked and bullied boy, finds love and revenge through Ellie, a beautiful but peculiar girl. So this fucking movie, dude. I found this more of a coming of age and, you know, finding your true self kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I totally agree with that. And I think that's one of the things that makes this work is because normally when you see vampire films, you normally see vampires as adults. These are obviously like supposed to be preteens, right? You know, Ellie, she's sort of, you know, she's a vampire. So she's a vampire that's centuries old, but she's always stuck in a 12-year-old girl's body. Right. And then, you know, your main actor, you know, he's Oscar, he's you know, he's in that period in his life where, like you said, he's coming of age, but he's trying to figure out who he is. You know, he's probably going through, you know, like those, you know, pubescent moments when, you know, you're transforming from a little kid into a teenager, and he's trying to deal with all that, you know, and let alone getting bullied at school. So I think it adds an interesting twist on not just vampires, but the emotions that somebody's going through at that period in their life, right?
Yep. So I also want to point out, speaking of them being so young, like I'm not even going to mention the actor's name because I know Swedish, like that whole language has like its own thing. So I'm not going to like sit here and butcher, but these two kids, like they killed it.
Yeah. I mean,
think
exceptionally.
And like, yeah. And, you know, going into that, the girl, they even, you know, this is a fun little, you know, bit of information about this film. You know, she's supposed to be androgynous, and, you know, which is another thing we kind of left out of tropes, but a lot of times vampires are, you know, pansexual, or they're not really, you know, they don't get too caught up in being a man or a woman. So in this, especially, you know, there's a scene where Ellie tells Oscar, you know, I'm not a girl. Would you still, you know, like me if I wasn't a girl? But, you know, she is, but she's not. So to make her seem more androgynous, they cut her her eyelashes, because, you know, the actress, she's got, you know, very feminine long eyelashes. They cut them down, and they also overdubbed her voice. So it's a boy's voice. But, you know, this follows Oscar. You know, he's at school, he's getting bullied. Like, have you ever noticed bullies in movies, especially horror films? Like, bullying is bad to any extent, or no matter how minuscule it might seem compared to movie bullying. But bullies in movies, man, like they don't give a shit. They will take it, like
they take it up a notch. I mean, because, you know, the
fuck
older
juvie or prison, man. Like, I'm gonna, like, I don't care if you drown. I don't care if you die. Like,
right. And I always carry a switchblade with me and wear a leather jacket, no matter what time period it's in. Like, bullies in movies, they're something else. I mean, you know, in real life too. I mean, you know, I went through a little phase when I was in middle school. You know, like, I mean, never to this extent. Nobody was trying to drown me or stab me, but, you know, we've all had our time.
And I'm not trying to undermine, I'm not trying to undermine real life bullying, but it seems like in horror movies, especially, the bullies are just like, and it's almost always a drowning thing. Have you noticed that? It's like, you know, even like Friday the 13th, just like neglecting him while he drowns, or it's always like the person being picked on can't swim. So the bully like shoves him and throw him in the water as a joke.
Well, and Sleepaway Camp, you know, they try and throw Angela in the water, right? You know, it's it's always, you know, it's always something like that. But I mean, that's one of those things that if you think about it as a human, it plays on human psychology. I mean, because if you can't swim, you know, all you got to do is pick somebody up and throw them in the freaking water, and then, you know, it's I mean, how
Game
scary
over.
is that, you know?
Right.
Because what can you do?
Right. Well, in this, it's not even really. Now, this I don't want to spoil too much, so we're not going to talk about this scene necessarily exactly what happens. But they don't throw him in the water. It's not like he can't swim, but they are taking the bullying to a whole nother level of trying to drown him.
Yeah,
but then
definitely.
some shit ensues. But now there is one scene. This isn't like giving away plot or anything, where they're bullying him. Where they wait for him to come out of like swim practice, and no, it's not when he comes out of swim practice. It's after he was like writing Morse code in the book, and they wait for him to come out of class, and they're like beating him with the stick.
Right.
Like, fuck these bullies, dude. But they get what's coming to them.
Yeah,
But-
so I mean, this movie's great. Like, guys, if you haven't seen this, it's a fantastic movie. It is Swedish. so you-
Cinematography is like,
Right. Well, the cinematographer is Hoyt van Hoytema, and this dude, he's done stuff with like Christopher Nolan. He's done like Dunkirk and Ad Astra and all that. Like, amazing. So if you know about his cinematography, then you're in for a treat. Like, this is beautifully filmed. It's one of those movies that you could literally just stop it at any frame and just admire the composition, admire the lighting, just admire how well shot, how well lit it is. But it never takes you out of the film. It's not like, his cinematography doesn't draw you out of the movie, because the movie is so strongly written that, this is one that I will visit time and time again. I've seen it a handful of times now. That's why I was very adamant on Justin, before we do this episode, make sure you watch this movie, because this probably would be my favorite vampire movie, if that's how strongly I feel about this, if it wasn't for the nostalgia factor of some of the other ones we're going to talk about. But
I can see that.
But this movie, there's so many awesome shots. So a little bit more about the movie. Let's give it a little bit better synopsis. So you have this bullied boy named Oscar. His parents are divorced, and he lives with his mom in this apartment block. And this whole movie is set in this snowy environment. It's cold. It's in Sweden. So it just has this very depressing, this very isolated tone to it. You can tell this kid is trying to deal with his parents' divorce. He's trying to deal with his coming of age into a teenager. He's trying to deal with this being bullied at school. He has no
Right.
friends until Ellie moves in next door to the apartment next to him, and she moves in with this older man. Like, her and this older man move in together, and at first you're like, well, is that her father? But you come to find out that it's more or less her familiar. It's her servant, because it's this older guy, and you start seeing him go out and try to secure victims for Ellie so she can feed. You got anything more on that, Justin? Or
Well, I think that this guy, Ellie should have dropped his ass, because he's fucking piss poor at his job. There's 2 times in the movie. I imagine she's been with this dude for a while, but when they move to this place, like now, there's 2 instances where he tries to like go get, blood for her. And both times are just complete screw ups. Not necessarily his fault. He's, interrupted in some way or another, and then ends up getting caught. But the first sequence where he is out in like that little forest by the road kind of.
Which that doesn't even seem private at all. Like, when I watch that movie, I'm like, why is he doing it right here? It's like well lit. That's the only thing in the movie where I'm like, why is he doing
but I
this right
still
here?
love that scene though, because
it's
I
one
just
of my
think
favorite.
like I just think the fucking that whole like the aesthetics and the cinematography.
Well, the shot where it's like, it's just framed so perfect, because what happens, guys, is, I don't mean to cut you off, Justin, but like, it's just
you're good.
framed so perfect where he's got this guy hanging upside down from a tree, because he's essentially trying to drain the blood out of him, like he's field dressing a deer or something, right? Like, he's
Right.
not cutting his skin off or taking his hair off, but he has him upside down, hanging from a tree, and he has this funnel going into this, this bucket or
Jug.
this jar, a jug, yeah. And that's where he's going to catch all the blood in. So he's starting to do this, and then all of a sudden you have these people that are just walking their dog in the middle of the night, which does happen. I walk my dog at night pretty much every day, right? And
Well, I mean, you may as well be a vampire. Like, you're up all night
well,
and then sleep during the day, you know?
and so they're walking the dog, and the dog sees him. So the shot is this gigantic white poodle standing there looking at him as he's, you know, trying to drain the blood from this guy. And they're in these, like, I don't even know what kind of trees they are, you know, just tall trees with snow all over the ground. It's just a beautiful shot. And he's trying to shoo the dog away because the owners are like yelling for their dog, right? The dog is just like, well, what the fuck's up? I want some blood, you know, like,
right. Well, he does start licking it
right
after.
So, you know, it's,
yeah, so he essentially has to run off after that. So that's the first time, you know, and then of course they do find the body. No, they don't find the body till later, but we're not going to talk about that because that's a cool scene too.
Right.
But he does dispose of the body, and then there's another time he tries, and this is the time he gets caught, and then that leads into
his demise, essentially.
His demise, pretty much. So now Ellie doesn't have her familiar to go out and get blood for her anymore. So now she has to start doing it herself, and then that starts more drama. And then, you know, go ahead.
As her and Oscar get closer and closer, right? Because like when she meets Oscar for the first time, like Oscar sits in this little courtyard in his apartment block by himself. And, you know, that's where he'll like go down there and he'll like stab a tree and take out his anger because of the bullies, right? And he'll sit down there by himself. And she, you know, of course, takes notice because he'll go out there at nighttime. He's the only one out there. He sits on this little jungle gym thing. And she goes down there, and at first he kind of notices she's a little off because she's always barefoot in the snow, and you know, she's very somber. And like when he first met her, she's like, well, you know, we can't be friends. And he's basically like, you know, who said
he's basically like, bold of you to fucking assume I wanted to be your friend.
Who said I wanted to be your friend, right? And then, you know, they kind of bond over, you know, basically a Rubik's Cube. And they grow closer, and he slowly starts finding out the truth about Ellie and what's going on with her. But he doesn't fucking care because, you know, just for him to have a relationship with somebody, you know, just to have that closeness with another,
right,
you know, human, quote unquote, you know, it's all he craves. It's all he wants, you know.
Well, he cares more than she does or she cares more than he does that he found out.
Right.
Because then she like runs away. So now it's the turning point in the movie where now he knows she's a vampire, which I like that she never says she's a vampire. When he finally confronts her about it, he's like, are you a vampire? And she's like, well, I mean, I live off blood, like I feed on blood.
Right.
But then it's like the thing that he's the most pissed off about in that scene isn't that she didn't tell him that she's a vampire. It's that she was stealing money.
Yeah, exactly. You know, he's like,
so it's like, I like you for who you are, but this is wrong. You can't be doing this. I don't give a shit that you're a vampire. Just don't steal shit.
Right. So let the right one in. There, like Justin said, there's an Americanized version called Let Me In, which in its own right is not a bad film, but it's nowhere near as good as this one. It's came out, I think, 2013, 2014, somewhere around there. But it's a very watered down version of this because for some reason Americans were like, oh, this was a great movie. Let's try to capitalize off of it and make our own and put some of our, you know, like Chloe Grace Moretz is in it. She plays Ellie, which she's a fine actor. The actors in that movie do fine, but it's not as good as this, right? This one shot very cold, very, you know, like I said, it does a very good job at isolating the characters. And that one is shot sort of in the same vein. They tried to do it in the same vein, but they also use a lot of warmer tones and stuff too. And I don't know. I just don't buy that story as well as I buy it from, you know, this writer director here. Americanized films, a lot of times they rely very heavily on how good of actors and actresses can we get, like not how good, but how attractive are they, should I say, right? So right. Obviously, you know, you have, you know, there's nothing wrong with the way the actors look in the Swedish version, but in America, we put more focus on those sort of things to drive sales, right?
Right,
and,
like who are they conventionally attractive?
Right, and in the Swedish version, it's like, these look like real people. These look like real kids, right? These look like, you know, you could go next door and see a kid that looks like this, because they're not like, well, he has to have this kind of look, he has to have this kind of build. They're like, no, this is the right actor for the story, right? And I'm sure
Right.
they've got the most talented people they can for the Americanized version, but they also got those Hollywood children, right? You know, like Chloe Grace Moretz, you know, she's a very, like you say, conventionally attractive young lady, you know, and that's not what they were thinking about when they did, you know, the Swedish version, because they were like, well, let's make her more androgynous. Let's cut her eyelashes. Let's give her a boy's voice. Let's, you know, dress her down to where she looks very homely, you know. It was more about the story, you know. It was less about like, okay, well, let's make this vampire girl look cute. Let's you know, let's cut her eyelashes off. You know what I mean? So it's just a difference between the two worlds, and there's nothing wrong either way. It's just what you prefer. But take time, read the subtitles, watch some foreign films, watch the Swedish version of Let the Right One In, because it is going to not only be probably one of the best vampire films you'll ever see, but it's going to be probably one of the best films you ever see. It's literally
definitely
not just vampires, but horror, but in cinema in general. It's got to be up there in my top 20 movies. You know, like, I fucking love it.
Yep. I agree.
So Let the Right One In, 2008. Justin, let's move to our second vampire pick. I mean, we've been on this for
a
and while
again,
now.
So these aren't necessarily in like a, you know, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 order, because like Andrew just said, you know, Let the Right One In. It's probably like his favorite vampire film, other than the nostalgia of one of these other films. But so these are just like what we think are just, you know,
exceptional,
excellent fucking vampire films. So this next film, up until, you know, I rewatched one of the other films on that we will talk about after this, I would have put before the other one, but after watching them both back to back, I have, you know, switched my stance on that a little bit, and that is 1985's Fright Night, not the remake with fucking Colin Farrell, but the OG, directed and written by Tom Holland, who of course also did the original Child's Play. So this stars Chris Sarandon, William Ragsdale, Amanda Beers, and of course this is about, you know, a teenager discovering that the newcomer in his neighborhood is a vampire. So he turns to an actor in a television horror show for help dealing with the undead. So this film, I feel like, is just all around fucking 80s cheese, and it pays homage to the old school creature features, right? You've got the show in the movie called Fright Night, which of course is the title of the film, where Peter Vincent, the character, he's like a host, and he stars in these films about vampires and werewolves and all of that. And this kid, Charlie, you know, he watches the show, he looks up to this guy, and then he finds out that his neighbor, well, he starts to suspect at first that his neighbor is a vampire. And Chris Sarandon plays the main vampire. His name is Jerry. And I just fucking love that character. I love the way Chris Sarandon plays that character, and I love the way that he looks when he turns into a vampire. And let's see, Evil Ed, that fucking character is amazing.
Played by
also
Stephen Jeffries. Yeah, his Evil Ed character is it's amazing. Like, that is one of my favorite shots, when he turns and he has the crucifix burn on his forehead. It's actually the cover of one of the alternate covers of the VHS. I have it right here in my hand, but yeah, where he just has the mangled vampire teeth and the wound of the crucifix on his head. It's just super sick. Like, I love that kid's character. That's one of the reasons I love the movie so much. It's just for his character.
I mean, I definitely like that character, but I just like this movie. This is a film that I could just literally probably watch a couple times a year and not be like, damn, I'm so sick of fucking watching this movie. Just because the way it's written, I love the way it's directed. I like Tom Holland as a director. the only character that really gets on my nerves is Charlie, which is supposed to be the main character, but he's kind of a bitch. Like, he's annoying. He's just fucking, he doesn't even get the hero arc. If you really watch, you notice Peter Vincent gets the hero arc, right?
Which Peter Vincent is named after
Peter Cushing and Vincent Price.
Yeah, so he's named after two horror legends himself. So, it's got that little cool things in there like that as well. That if you're in the know, then you'll catch them.
Right. So there's also, like I said, this kind of pays homage to the creature features to the point where, so Charlie basically he watches the show, like I said, and he starts to suspect that his neighbor's a vampire. So he wants to go get Peter Vincent to help him prove it and kill him. So he shows up, tells Peter Vincent what's going on. He's like, dude, you're crazy. Vampires aren't real. It's just a show. Also, I've been fired. And now they, kind of show their, it's kind of almost like a backhanded thing towards like slashers, because he's talking about, kids your age now, they don't care about vampires. Because now everybody's watching, like all these Freddy Kruegers and Jason Voorhees and stuff like that. So basically, he's like, yeah, you're crazy, go away.
Features.
Yeah. So then he tells his friends, he's like, hey, he's a fucking vampire. They're like, okay, you're crazy. So now everybody thinks that he's crazy. Even his friends won't listen to him. And his own home has been infiltrated by this vampire because, he's like, okay, he goes to Evil Ed and pays him for some like advice or something, which I found weird because he watches Fright Night. So he should know like all of Peter Vincent's like, well, this will kill vampires and this keeps him away. But instead he goes to Evil Ed and pays him money for advice on how to fight vampires. But
right. I mean,
yeah. But so he's like, oh, well, he can't get you because you have to invite him in your house. And I thought this scene was just, you talk about a fucking power move. He like gets back home and he's like, oh, I'm good. No worries. I'm never going to invite this dude in my house so he can't kill me. His mom's like, hey, Charlie, guess who's over to visit? And he steps in the living room and fucking Chris Sarandon sitting in the chair and just kind of turns around and grins at him like, hey, dude.
There's Jerry Dandridge sitting in the living room.
Yep. Now I can just fucking come in anytime I want. And then his mom literally tells him that. He's like, yeah, you're welcome anytime. And he's like, well, I think I'm going to come over more often then. And then there's some pretty cool scenes in this too. Like, I don't know when the last time you've watched this, but so you remember when he comes in the house and he like goes in his mom's room, and then he ends up in Charlie's room trying to kill him, or he's basically like, look, you leave me the hell alone, I'm not going to kill you. And then of course Charlie like doesn't take that deal. Should have probably taken that deal. He stabs him with a pencil.
Yeah, in the hand.
In the hand,
Isn't
yeah.
it in the hand,
Yeah, it's in the hand. And then he like kind of half transforms into his vampire form and he's pissed off. Then he turns into a bat and flies away with like the goofiest 80s like of the wings.
What I never got about this movie though is why is Jerry Dandridge into Amanda Bierce's character? Like she's like a high school girl. Like he's like, guess what? I'm a pedophile. It's like, well, that's one thing I never understood about this movie.
I think it's more of, again, the character Jerry Dandridge, Chris Sarandon's character in this, is just full of power moves. And I think the only reason he ever becomes infatuated with her is because it's Charlie's girlfriend.
I mean, I guess maybe showing that, hey, I can take everything from you. It's just one of them things that, has always been like...
No, well, it definitely is weird.
Why isn't he going after the mom?
Because she's only like 17 or whatever. So it is weird. Of course, the 80s were a different time. Doesn't make it any less weird, but...
The 80s were a different time.
Yeah. But I think it's more of that power move because then, you've got the club scene where... So now they're at the club. and he's dancing with Charlie's girlfriend, and he's like using his hypnotic powers on her, and she's infatuated with him because he's like this older, handsome man who for some reason can really rock a turtleneck sweater and is always eating fruit because, fun fact, apparently his backstory, which isn't actually mentioned in the movie, he's a fruit bat when he turns into a bat. So he's always eating like an apple or something. But so he's using that scene especially. He starts, groping her and dancing with her and like seducing her on the dance floor in this club in front of Charlie.
I mean, I love this movie, but that's always just been weird to me. Like, it's just always been like, like.
Right. And I do agree. It is kind of odd because it's like she's 17. You're like, however, centuries old.
But I would understand if like they referenced like his like Mina, right? Like they referenced his past. Oh, this is a young Mina. This is a young version of my ex-wife or my dead bride or something like that. But that was never like referenced in this movie. It was just kind of like, I guess, inferred. I guess. I don't know. Like,
well, I think they do the same thing. Like, I
have.
haven't watched this since like last October, but I think they do the same thing. I think they show a painting of him with his bride or something, and she looks like that character.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's just like inferred, but it's never like a plot line,
Right.
But I mean, this movie is great. It's like you said, it's 80s nostalgia all over the place, and there's a million fun facts about it, Justin. So this was the first vampire film to spend $1 million on special effects, which is surprising because, you had several, movies before this, and, you figured that they would have crossed that mark a lot sooner, but
definitely.
Yeah, this had a $9.5 million budget, and it was filmed at the same Hollywood backlot as the 1989 Tom Hanks classic, The Burbs, which I absolutely love. The Burbs, right? I mean, The Burbs came out after this, so maybe you can say The Burbs was filmed on Fright Night's set. But, you can kind of tell too, like if you look at Fright Night, then you look at The Burbs, the neighborhood kind of looks the The Burbs is an extraordinary movie. If you haven't seen that, it's kind of in the same vein as this. It's like horror, but it's kind of campy and kind of comedic in the same way. Very lighthearted. I watch it, at least once a year. So, and of all things, this is Tom Holland's directorial debut. So, I mean, that's a hell of a directorial debut.
Did he do anything after this before Child's Play? Well, Child's Play was what, 88?
I'm not sure.
I'm about to find out.
I just hate how when I look up Tom Holland, I always get Spider-Man guy. Yeah, which is fine, I guess. I mean, that guy's a fine actor, but it's like I'm more always trying to research Tom Holland, unless the goddamn Spider-Man guy.
Right.
But yeah, so before Fright Night, he was doing Hasbro commercials. So, I mean, as a director, though, he did Fright Night was first, and then he did Amazing Stories, Fatal Beauty, and then Child's Play. Then he went on to do some Tales from the Crypt and stuff like that, right? Yeah, I mean, he hit the ground running for sure.
Well, but, I think for a debut, this was definitely because there are parts of this movie. Couldn't decide if I was gonna say parts of this movie or moments in this movie, but I don't know. I just feel like it's written very well, but it's also just directed extremely well. I think the directing is probably my favorite thing about this film, and like I was saying, like the hero arc, for example. That's given to Vincent Price, which I think that the actor does an extremely good job. But, it's just little things in this film, like with how they play with mirrors. So now Vincent Price is finally like realized, okay, wait, maybe they are vampires, because he goes to isn't he trying to make Charlie's friend or make Charlie realize that they're not real vampires, and his friends have
proven that they are.
So he goes in and he uses like that little compact mirror, and he drops it and it breaks, and when he picks it up, he realizes that he doesn't see Chris Sarandon's reflection in it, but it's such a subtle, it's not like the camera's like right on it. It's like, oh, look. But you can tell by the look on his face that, oh shit, he is a real vampire. And then he's like, well, we got to go, sorry for wasting your time. We got to get the hell out of here.
Right.
And then Chris Sarandon looks down at the ground and after they've left and finds the piece of mirror. And that's how he knows that, okay, well, now they know. So now I've got to kill him. Like, and then, all hell breaks loose from there. But I just feel like it's little moments like that in this movie that make me like it so much. That and just, I just think it's funny every time Chris Sarandon's character does some power move. Like, you could probably make a list of all of those, like coming into the house because, coming into the house because the mom invited him, the club scene. And then there's, there's one scene I remember where Charlie's hiding in the bushes trying to like spy on them. And Chris Sarandon's just like nonchalantly eating an apple. And then Charlie's mom ruins his cover and she's like calling for him and it gave him away. And then Chris Sarandon just throws his apple core like exactly where Charlie's hiding, kind of saying, I know you're there, dude. But
I read that there was talks or there was an idea played around with Tom Holland saying that he would like to make a sequel to Fright Night, and it would be where
is there not one though? I could have sworn there is a Fright Night 2.
No, they were going to have a direct sequel where he was talking about a direct sequel to it, to where I think maybe it was going to be Charlie Brewster and Amanda Bierce maybe having children, or there was something where a family was going to live in Charlie Brewster's house and the kids were going to start trying to think that something evil lived next door, just like he did with Jerry Dandridge, but it was going to be Evil Ed growing up as a vampire, and Evil Ed was going to try to bring back Jerry Dandridge.
Well, see, there is a Fright Night 2.
Yeah, but I think this was going to be more of a
okay,
direct.
so you're just basically saying it was like a completely different, like, right.
Yeah,
right.
So
because this one, see, I've never seen the Fright Night 2. This says it's in 1988. I know it exists. It's just this is one of those movies that has a sequel that I'm like, I'm not gonna watch it because I like the first one. Like there are sequels to the next film we're gonna talk about, but I've not watched them because I don't want it to ruin that. But according to IMDb, this has Charlie Brewster's in it.
Well, you got Roddy McDowall plays Peter Vincent.
Yeah.
William Ragsdale, same guy, plays Charlie Brewster.
Right. Evil Ed isn't in here. Yeah.
So it's one of those that is sort of, it
was like probably a cash grab kind of thing, because it's like, okay, well, Fright Night was successful. Let's make a sequel. And then it apparently wasn't that successful because I've never really heard too many. I've heard about it, but never heard people praising it. IMDb only gives it like 5.9 stars.
Tommy Lee Wallace directed it. He directed Season of the Witch, Halloween 3, and he played one of the pirate ghosts in The Fog. So there's your little
I might give it a watch. I don't know, but
he also directed the second Vampires movie, Vampires Los Muertos, with Bon Jovi. So let's go ahead and let's talk about what I've always considered. If you ever ask me, Justin, what my favorite vampire movie is, for the last probably 15 years, you got the same answer. And probably for the next 15 years, you're going to get the same answer, because I saw this movie as a kid.
Until we make a vampire film.
And it has always stuck with me, right?
Right.
And this movie, guys, is
The Lost Boys.
The Lost Boys, right? From 1987.
Yep.
So this was directed by Joel Schumacher. It stars Jason Patric, the one, the only, Kiefer Sutherland, Corey Haim, Corey Feldman. You had your gruesome twosome from the 80s, your two Coreys, Jason Newlander, Jamie Gertz, Edward Herman, and Diane West.
Yeah, extremely star-studded cast. And also, I want to shout out real quick, rest in peace, Joel Schumacher.
Yeah,
he died at the end of last month. He directed this, directed some other great films, but yeah,
this is my Joel Schumacher.
Yeah, this is the Joel Schumacher film.
So the synopsis, if you haven't seen it, after moving to a new town, two brothers discovered that the area is a haven for vampires. So essentially, two boys and their mom, she's a single mother, she moves them to Santa Carla, California. And as they get there, they're kind of wandering the beach because it's a beach town, and they're kind of wandering the pier looking for work. The boys are out there doing what young kids do. One's a teenager, one's a preteen, and the mom is kind of wandering around looking for work. And, the boys kind of start automatically noticing that something is weird in the town. And, our key points here, Justin, it has the coolest atmosphere and general aesthetic in vampire film history, right?
Yep.
You have cool vampires, right? You have your suave vampires, and then you have your cool vampires. And the vampires in this movie they're just cool, right? They're those...
Well, they're almost a
cool
mixture of both. Like, they're not like the suave and the traditional, like wearing a blouse and,
crying
purple tears, but like they're cool and they know they're fucking cool.
Well, Kiefer Sutherland does have a tear that falls out of his face in this movie, but that's a fun fact I'll get into later.
He does, but it's not purple.
And it's not because...
But it's not purple.
It was scripted in. It was because supposedly his contacts were that they made them wear were bothering all their eyes, and when he was acting, it just kind of like watered up, and they're like, that looks fucking cool, let's leave it in the movie. Because if you watch it, there's no reason for him to even be dropping a tear in that shot.
Leave the camera rolling, we're gonna get gold.
Yeah.
Right.
But this movie was cast perfectly. I mean, of course, you had the two Coreys. They did all kinds of things together in the 80s. And then, you had fucking Kiefer Sutherland in this, right? Kiefer Sutherland, at the time was huge. Like Justin said, it was star-studded. People wanted to see this movie. This was the vampire movie made for the MTV generation. And one of both our collective favorite bands, Tiger Army, they have a song that is directly inspired by this. It's called Santa Carla Twilight.
Yep.
So that not only makes this film, extra rad, but it also makes Tiger Army even more rad. That they have an amazing song that was inspired by...
Right. That is my favorite Tiger Army song.
It is not my favorite, but it is up there, right?
It's up there.
It is up there. And your cinematographer, Michael Chapman, known for Raging Bull, Taxi Driver, he was hired to make the film a little more mature than what it was originally written.
Because this was actually originally probably going to be more of like a Goonies kind of thing.
Right.
And then Tom Holland didn't want that. Or not Tom Holland. Fucking
Joel Schumacher.
I'm stuck on Fright Night. Joel Schumacher didn't want that. He wanted to just make he didn't want to just make a basic teen vampire movie. He wanted it to be like over the top and more adult. So they, hired Michael Chapman. And I think that the cinematography is fucking amazing, but I feel like it lends, itself to just making it not like goofy. I feel like, because the Goonies is good. Like, we're not gonna, bash the Goonies here, but it's a
the
kids
Goonies
movie,
is what it
right?
was, though. Yeah, it is what it was, right? Like, this was literally, it was like you said, it was like, if you watch the Goonies when you're 12, you're gonna watch this when you're 16, 17, 18, right? And it literally is in the same vein, but it's like for a little bit more mature crowd, right? Because you have fucking goddamn vampires riding dirt bikes on the beach. Like,
right?
How fucking gnarly is that? Like, can you ever think of another movie where you got vampires riding dirt bikes on the beach? Like, come on now. Like, and what is it? What is the tagline for this? It is sleep all day, party all night, never grow old, never die. Like, if that doesn't speak to you as a teenager,
right?
Like, that's all you want to do.
Obviously, like a play on, like Peter Pan. Like, even the name The Lost Boys is taken from that, but it's nothing like Peter Pan, obviously. But so basically, what happens after they're in this town and they start realizing things are going south. The one character, I forget his name, like the older brother, Michael, he's infatuated with this girl. And then when he goes, Star. And when he tries to get her attention, he sees that she runs off with these other dudes that are way cooler than him. So he goes and like tries to pierce his ear and get a leather jacket, and he's riding a dirt bike and stuff. And they're like, okay, you want to hang out with us? Like, you know, you got to pass the test. So he rides with them on the beach and ends up at their like the coolest fucking vampire hideout that I've ever seen. It was like a hotel, wasn't it? That had.
Yeah, it was a resort when there was an earthquake, the resort, basically a hotel, right, fell down into the crack.
They like swallowed it into the earth. So they've got this cool like chill spot. I mean, they've got this place like, I don't know, it's just decorated all awesome. And it's like a vampire version, or it's like an underground version of like the old punk houses, you know, like where like you never know who owned it. It was like just, well, I'm probably speaking to people who have no idea about this, but if you've ever spent any time as a punk kid, someone always had a punk house, and it's where you all went to hang out. You would crash there. You never know who owned it. And there were easily like, 10 or 15 of you in this house. You graffiti on the wall, do whatever. And that's like, to me,
apparently hung up pictures of Jim Morrison that were fucking huge.
Right. But, so that's what this is. Like, to me, that was what this was the equivalent of. Only like,
right.
It was like the mansion version of that.
Right. Like you said, it's literally like the Lost Boys from Peter Pan. They have their own place. I mean, they're teenagers, but there's no governing Dracula. There's no governing adult vampires. I mean, you have the leader of the vampires, but he lives a normal life in this movie. He stays in a regular home. These guys,
he's trying to build a family though, to keep them like. He doesn't want them to be running as wild as they are. That's the whole like plot of the movie, is he's trying to
they're just left
the mom of the two main characters. Yeah, and
he wants to have a vampire Brady Bunch.
Pretty much. But they're not having it. They're just like, we got this badass fucking underground hotel hideout. We ride dirt bikes and fuck shit up. So this is one of my favorite scenes of the film, when they trick Michael into becoming a vampire. This is, of course, the classic. This is what we were talking about when we were talking about
what we do in the
shadows. So, they're eating Chinese food. Kiefer Sutherland's character, David, hands Michael some noodles, and he plays mind tricks on him and makes him think he's eating worms. Then he throws it out and he's like, it was just noodles, dude. You wasted your food. When
you're talking about a power move.
Yeah, that was a power move. And then he makes his own food look like maggots, and Michael's freaking out. And he's like, no, he's eating noodles, and he makes it look like worms. But he gives Michael rice and makes it look like maggots. Yeah.
But all of this is just a trick to make Michael drink blood, because then they give him a bottle and they say, oh, it's blood. And Michael's like, yeah, bullshit. You're trying to trick me again. So Michael drinks Kiefer Sutherland's blood out of the bottle, which essentially turns him into a half-breed vampire, right?
Yeah.
And in order for him to become a full-blood vampire, he has to make a kill on his own accord. And so this is where Michael starts struggling with his cravings to kill, right? Because at one point in the movie, he almost kills his brother.
Yep.
But their
gets
dog
fucked up by a dog.
Right. Nanook, their dog Nanook, saves his brother, right?
Yep.
But this movie's just chocked full of so much like 80s greatness. I mean, you have apparently saxophone players were huge in the 80s. I don't know, like
ripped and oiled up.
Right. I mean, like this movie is just freaking great. You got motorcycles, you have mullets, you have saxophone players, you have this dude that looks like Jim Morrison, you have, the comic book aspect to it, right? Because the Frog Brothers, they run a comic book store. So there's something that kids at that time in their life in the 80s, everybody could have related to, right? That's why I think this movie really took off and really got super popular at the time, because you can watch it and it does have, if you look at it from an analytical point, it's not maybe as good or as well written as some other vampire movies, but just like the overall tone and the overall atmosphere that it delivers just really, really draws you in and just really makes you think. It's campy. There are some moments as a kid, like I said, I saw this really early like really early in my life. I was born in 1986. This came out in 1987. I probably saw this when I was like 8 or 9, and it scared the ever living piss out of me. And because there are scenes that if you watch it as a kid will scare you, like when the Frog Brothers, they go down to stake the vampires when they're in their cave sleeping, right?
Yeah.
They wake them up. That's when Kiefer Sutherland has that tear as he's like coming out of the cave to grab, he's got him by the shoe or whatever, and then he sheds that tear. And essentially they cut it to make it kind of look like, oh, well, he's either shedding a tear because they just killed one of his vampire brothers, or he's shedding a tear because he's getting burned by the sunlight. But Kiefer Sutherland literally had contact issues so that his eyes were watering.
Right.
But like even the grandpa in this, right? Like the grandpa is who they go to live with. This family moves in with the mother's father. And so the kid's grandpa. And so the grandpa is this weird, like eccentric character. He does like all this taxidermy and shit like that. But it comes to find out that the grandfather, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Lost Boys, you're fucking up. So I'm gonna go ahead and spoil it. You should have seen it by now, right?
Right.
So it comes to find out at the end, you know, he talks about, well, one thing I hate about this town is all the goddamn vampires or whatever. Something to that effect, right? So it's like the grandfather knew all along that the town was infested with vampires. And that's the last line of the
fucking movie too.
Right.
So they just went through all the shit. They finally, you know, Michael finally won. They had the battle, the showdown between Michael and David, and you know they saved Star and that little kid vampire. So now it's like the end, you know, happily ever after, and the grandpa comes in, gets a beer out of the fridge, and literally as nonchalantly as possible. It's one thing I never could stand about this town is all the damn vampires. And then they're just like, really?
Yeah, it's like, well, he knew all along, like, you know, appreciate the heads up, Pops. But, you know, it's you know, like I said, you have Corey Haim, you know, and Corey Feldman. You know, unfortunately, Corey Haim, he died in 2010. You know, he had a complicated life. I'm pretty sure that was more like, I can't remember if it was an overdose or something like that, but the two Corys, Corey Feldman, Corey Haim, they did a lot of stuff together throughout the 80s. And anytime you saw them in a movie together, you knew that it was going to be a good time just because of how they played off of one another, right? They were real life best friends and, you know, became, you know, pretty much inseparable in movies. So, like I said, it's just so much perfect 80s nostalgia here, so much, you know, vampire trope stuff in here, Justin. I mean, so the tropes you have in this, you have the holy water, right? You have the whole seductive vampire aspect, right? Because you have Kiefer Sutherland trying to seduce Star. You have the lead vampire. His name was, what was the guy's name? I can't even remember. Max. You had Max trying to seduce the mom. You had Star trying to seduce Michael, you know, because Michael was supposed to be her first kill, because she was a half-breed vampire too, so she was supposed to kill Michael for Kiefer Sutherland so she could become a full vampire, you know. I don't know. What was your favorite scene in this movie? Let's talk about that, and then let's round this one out.
So my favorite scenes, besides, you know, the Chinese food scene, I really like the train bridge scene because, you know, so Michael doesn't fully know yet what has happened, and, you know, they're all hanging and they let go. And then I remember seeing that scene for the first time and just imagining what Michael was thinking, because he never let go. He just lost his grip. He didn't he let go, but he didn't, you know, on his own accord let go like they did. The train vibrating, he just lost control and he fell. So that's the first time he realized, like, hey, something's different. So that to me was a big scene. Plus, I just like the way it's shot. I think it looks cool with the fog under the bridge, and then they all fall into the fog, and you hear them yelling, "Come on, you're one of us, Michael, come on." So,
and then it is a pivotal scene for sure. And then it transformed, it's smash cuts or sort of dissolve cuts.
He wakes up in
into
his bed. Yeah. So the Chinese food scene, and then probably the whole the dirt bike montage is really cool. Where Michael first rides with them.
Right, which is really cool because, I mean, just the tracking shot of them actually riding down the beach, as a group. Yep. I don't know if you remember the side tracking shot. I don't know how they filmed it. By helicopter, probably.
This is right when they first got off the pier, right? And they're on the beach.
Yep, when they jump down off the steps of the pier and they're riding through all the people.
Yeah.
Super sick shot. And then my favorite scene of the entire movie is the beach massacre scene, right, where they're all perched in the tree.
Oh yeah, and the surf Nazis.
You got the people down there basically partying at the beach, and then they go down there, and it's like one of the goriest scenes in the movie, right, where you have the close up of them biting into that dude's skull.
Yeah. That's where they're trying to get Michael to make his first kill, right?
Yeah. So this movie, Justin, was filmed in only 3 weeks. Did you know that? That's pretty gnarly.
I didn't know that.
It filmed in only 3 weeks. Frog Brothers, Edgar and Allan, obviously named after Edgar Allan Poe, right? And interesting fact, Jim Carrey was considered for the role of David. Could you imagine how different this movie would be if Jim Carrey played David?
Alrighty then. That would have been
right.
Fucking
So, because he played a vampire previously in a movie called Once Bitten in 1985. So, so that's Lost Boys, guys. So if you have not seen any of these movies, please do yourself a favor and, binge watch some vampire movies. Take time and figure out which ones are your favorites and what do you like about vampires movies, because they range from very serious to over the top to sort of in between, right? Because I would say Lost Boys is kind of in between. At times it takes itself very serious, and other times it has comedic roles, especially the two the conversations between the two brothers, right? Sort of when he says my own brother, a goddamn shit-sucking vampire or something like that. Wait till mom finds out, buddy, right? So they still play it's very serious that my brother's a vampire, but I'm still gonna be a brother and I'm gonna tattletale on you and shit, right? So
right.
It's a very good movie. Like I said, it's my favorite. If you ever ask me, Lost Boys is the GOAT. But there's also movies that I recognize are a lot better, sort of Let the Right One In. But Lost Boys holds a special place in my heart.
Oh, yeah, definitely. So that is going to be it for our vampire episode. Before we close this out, is there anything that you want to add, Andrew?
Yeah, Justin, I got one thing that I want to talk about real quick. Since we've decided to forego Sleazemail for the next several episodes, I think a new fun segment will be horror trivia. So this is going to be something that you guys as a listener can either, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can type your answers down in the comment section, or just play along if you're listening on the audio podcast version. So Justin, the way I want to do this is, before we go, I want to ask you 2 different trivia questions and see if you can get the answers right or any variation of a right answer. So you game for that?
I am down.
All right, so trivia question number 1. Guys, these are coming straight from this board game I got called Slash Cards, and it's basically a horror board game with trivia horror questions, right? So I'm going to ask Justin these questions. He's not allowed to use Google or IMDb or anything of the sort.
I'm on video, so you can see my hands.
Here we go. Name 5 horror movies that take place in New York City.
New York City. Okay. Jason Takes Manhattan.
It's 1. I feel like I should be timing
Cloverfield.
you. 2.
The New York Ripper.
3.
I think that takes place in New York.
It does.
I know. New York Ripper. Maniac.
4.
Ooh, this is gonna be tough because now I'm like, do you count I Am Legend as a horror film?
Nope.
God damn it. What was that movie? Shaft, about the elevator? Wasn't that in New York?
I have no fucking no idea what you're talking about. I know there's a movie called Devil that had an
I'm
elevator.
not talking about that. Okay, just
I know
Google.
about Shaft. That was
No.
Think about how about a movie?
What have I said so far? I've said Jason Takes Manhattan, Maniac, Cloverfield, and New York Ripper, right?
Yep.
How about? I feel like this would just be a lot easier if it wasn't trivia. Like if we were just casually talking about
well,
this.
the pressure's on. The pressure's on,
because
Justin.
now this is my last one. Fuck.
Think about a movie. I'll give you a hint. One by. It's a 1968 film, Justin, and it's by Roman Polanski.
Oh fuck.
Come on, you know this. It stars Mia Farrow.
68. Roman Polanski.
I mean, there's a million New York ones, but this one, you know this. What is it?
And that's what I'm saying. Since it's trivia, I'm all like, fuck. The listeners are probably getting a kick out of me sitting here like not getting this shit.
Okay. You got one more.
And I can't fucking think of one. Okay, give me 10 more seconds because we're gonna drag this out.
All right. Starts with an R. It's 2 words. This is an easy one. As a runtime at 2 hours and 17 minutes.
Oh my god.
I'm gonna give you the synopsis.
Go for it.
A young couple trying for a baby move into a fancy apartment surround. There you go. Give him a hand, everybody.
Oh my god, so, that's tough though, dude. Like
it's tough when you're on the line.
Like you can know all of the stuff, and then when someone starts giving you trivia questions, it's like. But I like this. This is fun.
Okay, so
hit me.
Here we go. This is in the same vein. Are you ready?
Yep.
Name 4 horror movies that begin with the letter W.
The letter W?
Yep.
That's such a...
And T doesn't count. Like, T counts, right? It can be the something.
So you said 4 films, right?
4 films.
Why can't I think
about one... This is hard. We talked about one previously in this podcast.
In this very podcast. Oh,
not this podcast.
What we did. What We Do in the Shadows.
There you go. It's one.
Let's see. What podcast? What episode were you going to say we did this in or mention this?
We talked about it in the Lighthouse episode.
Oh, The Witch.
The Witch.
So let's see. So I've got The Witch. What We Do in the Shadows. That film that just came out, The Wretched.
There's 3.
Does it have to be? As long as it doesn't have to be a film, or I can name films I haven't got to see yet because I haven't seen that.
That's
I just
fine.
know it exists. W.
Do you remember Ty West? He had a movie, I think, that starts with a W. It's about the spirits that live in a house. Was that Ty West? Barbara Crampton was in it. 2015.
It's not coming to me. It might in a minute. Okay. Well,
it wasn't Ty West, by the way.
Who was it?
It was Ted Geoghegan.
Wrong Turn.
Wrong Turn. That's 4.
Oh, fuck
right?
yes. I thought I was about to go for 5 because I was about to be like, Wolfen. I have a copy of VHS of that on it.
There you go. What about Wolf with Jack Nicholson?
Yeah,
I was thinking of We Are Still Here. You have Wes Craven's New Nightmare. You have I mean, I don't know. It's hard when you're on the spot.
Hit me with one more. Hit me just one more.
One more?
I dig this. I almost never want to bring Sleaze Mail back. Just always do this. Next week, I'm going to hit you with trivia.
Okay.
Okay, I agree.
In this 1979 film, a babysitter receives a series of disturbing phone calls and contacts the police.
When a stranger calls.
But, yep, there you go. 1979.
Boom.
There you go. So,
All
guys,
right.
that is our new segment called Trivia of Terror. So, I hope you guys got those quicker than Justin. If not,
you'll see
tune in
how
next
hard
week.
it is, though. Next week,
Yeah.
I'm going to grow Andrew with some trivia questions. And then I think as this segment evolves, we'll get it to where we both got some questions for each other. We just got to kind of make it to where, because I was going to look up some questions for you, but I didn't want to touch my computer while I was answering these because I didn't want people to think I was looking up answers. So
I'll tell you what we'll do next
I might
time.
write some down like on actual paper.
I can take pictures of some of these trivia cards because I haven't looked through these. There's massive stacks, and then you can ask me some that way.
Well, I still might I might just look up
Buy
some
the
of
goddamn board game.
by the game. I might just still look up some of my own, just because I know
Okay.
that you would actually not look at the answers, or you'd have Tawny look at the questions and send me the pictures or something. But for the audience sake, I want them to know
But I
that
ain't
these
no
aren't
cheater.
the same questions that you have on the flashcards. Well, you ain't no cheater, but they don't know that. So, but yeah, so that's been episode 7,
Okay.
the vampire episode. I know it was a long one and our schedule's been all over the place, but this is the week, damn it, that it is back on track. So go like our Instagram, follow us on Instagram, whatever, Twitter at Black Mass Films. You can find me on Instagram at Dawn of the Living Dad. You can find Andrew on Instagram at Drew X Cipher, and him also on Twitter, the same thing. And my Twitter is HorrorDad13. So thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you for bearing with us on this crazy schedule, and hopefully everything gets back to normal. So stay safe, stay creepy, guys, and we will catch you in the next episode.
See ya.